Thank you so much. Is there public comment this morning?
We do not have any public commenters registered at this time. However, we did receive one letter of correspondence, which was distributed to the Reno City Council yesterday afternoon. It was one letter in opposition of a various item, but also related to the budget specifically. So that has been distributed and is a part of the permanent record, and we have no additional, I apologize. We have 2 members via Zoom. So we'll move to our first public commenter is Anne Marie Grant.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. Welcome and good morning.
Anne Marie Grant for the record, ANNEMARIEGRANT. My brother Thomas Purdy was murdered by Reno Police and Washoe County Sheriff's Office October 8, 2015. During a mental health crisis, he was hog-tied by Reno Police for over 40 minutes and then asphyxiated at the Washoe County Jail by Deputy Andre Silva, Deputy Brandon Glenn. And I would like to talk about the constitutional violations that are going on at the Washoe County Jail currently. I would like to remind everybody in this room that it is our community members who are up there yet to be convicted of a crime, many of them. And it's care before custody. The first word is care. I would like to talk about an inmate who has suffered traumatic brain injuries, filed grievances regarding the lack of availability in contacting his family, friends, because of electronic communication services going down frequently as the communications devices being unavailable because there are far too few of them for the over 1,300 or more inmates that pack the facility. This has been cited in a complaint to the Department of Justice numerous times and will be corroborated by other inmates at the jail. There is another inmate there who has an injury to his wrist, was taken into custody over 60 days ago, and his wrist has been left untreated. An inmate has been there for 100 to 150 days with a shoulder injury left untreated. Another inmate has been there 100 to 150 days. He too is designated with a foot injury that required stitches. They were left in too long. That caused an infection because the Washoe County Jail is not providing adequate medical attention to our community members. There was also another inmate there. The Washoe County Jail refuses to give him his medications he was required to and has a physician's prescription before incarceration. And I just want to also read some other comments. This one is from a community member about the Washoe County Jail. I was arrested in possession of dangerous drugs. I had 2 of my pills for anxiety in a sandwich baggie because I didn't have my whole bottle and lost them. I was put up at the jail, and their solution was to take me out of general population, strip search me naked, cover me in a heavy over-the-head, armless, legless, sideless Flintstone suit, and put me in a glass box on a metal slab on suicide watch. The entire situation was wrong. They treat you like an animal, and they are abusers. They cracked my ribs, left me with a swollen face and sprained and swollen hand. I had to go to the hospital after they finally released me because they wouldn't give me medical attention. They get federal dollars for this jail. My brother died at that jail along with 2 other men, and the jail death rate was 600 times the national average. Stop ignoring what's going on up at that jail.
Our next public commenter is Tamika Shanti via Zoom.
Good morning. My name is Tamika Shanti for the record. That's SHAUNTEE. I am online this morning on behalf of the ACLU of Nevada, and I'll just be monitoring the budget discussion this morning and observing the meeting, just for the record. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Any additional public comments, Madam Clerk?
With that, Vice Mayor, we have no additional public comment.
Okay, we'll close this item and move on to item A4, which is the approval of the agenda. I'll start with Mr. Manager. Are there any changes to the agenda?
They're not. We're ready to go.
Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I have a question on the agenda.
Okay.
First of
Ms.
all,
Breckus.
will we be joined by the mayor today?
I don't believe so, but is that a question about the agenda or a personal question?
Yes, her name is listed on the agenda. This is the most important work we do all year, that and
Ms.
evaluate
Breckus,
the mayor.
thank you. That's a speaking objection. I'll say that you're out of order.
Okay.
Do you have a
Thank you-
question?
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Esteemed officer. The other question I have is, there's flyers all around the building advertising budget. They've been up for months. They show 3 days. I have last year's budget in March. We did 3 days. We came back in May and did 3 days. But somehow the third day that I presumed we were going to do today is not on my calendar and does not seem to be agendized. I'm wondering why facing the most uncertain economic times I've seen in a decade, with 3 new members, we've cut down on our budget time and up the presence of our leader. Thank you.
Mr. Manager, do you have any comments?
Of course. In consultation with the finance director and the other professionals that we have on the team here, we don't believe that we need a third day to work up what is essentially a flat budget.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Any additional questions from the body? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion. Approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Ms. Dewar, a second by Mr. Martinez. Any additional questions? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, before we get to the finance items in B1, I have a disclosure to read. Madam Mayor, fellow city council members, especially the member from Ward 1, and Madam Clerk, in the interest of full transparency, I am disclosing that my law firm, Hutchison and Steffen, represents the Reno Police Protective Association, both supervisory and non-supervisory groups, and the Reno Professional Administrative Group on collective bargaining matters. On this matter, I have sought guidance from the City Attorney's Office. Given my employment, I have a commitment in a private capacity to the interests of RPPA and RPAG. Item B1 does not directly pertain to RPPA, RPAG, or their respective collective bargaining agreements. Rather, it is my understanding that today's presentation discussion is designed as an update to the fiscal year 23-24 budget. As such, staff is not requesting specific direction from the City Council on any of the department's work programs or the work program of the police department in particular. Given the informational nature of today's item, my commitment in a private capacity to the interests of RPPA and RPAG would not clearly materially affect the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in my position to warrant abstention under NRS 420 sub 3. Madam Clerk, please accept this disclosure and lodge it on the record for this meeting and subsequent meetings pertaining to this agenda item. Thank you.
Mr. Presiding Chair, why'd you signal me out in that disclosure?
You're out of order, Ms. Breckus. Item B1.
Good morning, Vice Mayor Reese and council members. Give me 1 second here.
Ms. Van Buren, while you're getting set up, let me just share with the body that we'll have a number of presentations today, and it's a budget workshop as opposed to the more formal city council meeting. So to the extent possible, there will be allowances made for additional time for discussion on important points, but we will have to appreciate that all of us may have input to give, and we have 2 very long days ahead of us. And so please try to stay to the 3 minutes. If you need additional time, please ask for it, and we'll be more happy to look at it at a time. We'll also ask questions at the end of presentations, not in the middle of it. Each of the presenters have made commitments to try to get through their materials somewhat as expeditiously as possible with the board materials provided. And so rather than interject in the middle of presentations, try to hold your comments till the end of the presentations. If there is something that is absolutely burning a hole in your brain, we can take it up, but otherwise we'll wait until after the end of presentations.
Mr.
Yes, Madam Dewar, Ms. Dewar.
Yeah, a question I had asked about this actually prior to today, and I was led to believe that you're going to be the primary presenter today. Is that correct?
I will be presenting all the financial information today, yes.
Right, but that's the majority of it, I think.
Well, we have 3 presentations. Mine will probably be the longest, but the others
Okay.
are a little lengthy too.
Okay, and then I understood that during your presentation, you plan to pause at critical junctures to allow us to ask questions. Is that your understanding?
We can. My intent is to really go through my whole presentation. It's very high level, and so that we can kind of get through the day a little faster, because Carrie Koski will be giving a presentation on the Capitol
Okay.
following me, and then we'll have a discussion on the fee schedule that Matt Taylor will be doing.
Just to be clear, I was informed by the manager that your presentation might go an hour and a half and that you were planning to pause several times in there to allow us to ask questions.
And that's my fault. I did
Oh.
inadvertently mislead you in that the pauses that I was referencing were the pauses between the general fund and financial information, the CIP and condition index, and then the fee schedule
Okay.
portions of the
Well,
presentation.
we'll ride along. We'll see how
Well,
it
on
goes.
that,
But only humanly possible, Ms. Dewar. I appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah,
We
I just
need
wanted to get
moments-
clarity.
Yeah, we need moments to be able to
Yeah.
ask questions. So don't take us too long before you know that we've got itchy trigger fingers and we would like to have some
Well, that's
opportunity to
what we're
have
here
some
for,
questions,
right?
right?
I'll be presenting all the funds today, so I will stop after the general fund. If you would
Okay,
prefer, I
perfect.
can stop after that, and then we
Yeah,
can address
I
questions,
think
and
that'd be
then,
great. All right,
Well,
thanks.
the other thing is for the members, please feel free to get up and use the restroom. Understand that we have some quorum-related issues, so just be mindful of that. We'll ultimately potentially have I likely will do a working lunch unless the body prefers something else. And so we've got a number of things to get through, and so we'll try to get through them as best we can, but we know it's an iterative process.
Great, thank you.
okay. So Vicki Van Buren, Director of Finance, here today to present to you a budget update for the 23-24 budget, and I'm also going to give you an update on the current year budget, where we're estimating that to come in. Just to give you an outline, I was going to start with this as to how this is going to proceed. I have looked at this and practiced this a little bit, and it took me about an hour to get through my slides. So when we get through the general fund, probably be 30 minutes into it, I will give a little break there to ask some questions. But I don't anticipate my section taking more than an hour, and it's a lot of information. I realize that, but this is our first look at how everything is rolling up. We will still continue to look at revenues as we get those in. We have not gotten C-Tax yet for January. We expect that tomorrow. And then we just got projections, the actual final projections from property tax on Friday. So this is not a final budget. This is our first roll-up on estimates based at the point we rolled this up, but we will continue to make revisions and bring that back to you in May with recommendations at that point. But this has everything that we currently have in the city rolled up into it today for discussion. What I'm looking for council today would be a discussion of the priorities as far as when you look at the additional funding requests that are in the budget binder that was provided to you based on the overarching goals that council has established. I'd like to hear feedback on what you think on the additional funding requests, if at the point when we start rolling this with the final projections as we get those in the next couple weeks, we'll be finalizing all of that to make sure that we kind of address any items that you see or you want to see either differently than were presented today or things that you would want to see in the future. So that's the kind of discussion I would like to hear the feedback today on that. As we move into budget development for this current year, this year's a little different than the other years. Previous 2 years, we've been focused on pandemic. This year, we're more focused on economic factors such as high inflation and then the continuing strong labor market. We're looking at the Federal Reserves. They have interest rate hikes going on because they're trying to get inflation under control. We anticipate that we're going to still see some inflation going into the future, and we're going to see that the interest rates continue to climb probably for the next 6 months or more through the end of the year. The Fed started increasing their interest rates 1 year ago in March of last year, and that's continuing because the inflation has not gotten to the level that they would like to see it at. It's typically 2 to 3% is where we want to see inflation, not up around the 6% level. And so we are going to see that. And because of that, we're going to see that our budget is going to be, I wouldn't say flat, but it's going to be more of a normal budget outside of what we've seen in the past few years, where we've seen pretty significant growth with the stimulus money and the things coming into the economy. And we'll kind of get into that as I get a little farther. We also have some volatility in the banking crisis in that market. So right now, everything is pretty fluid. But I think what we're seeing on our side as far as trends and going forward, we have a stable path forward. We just have to focus on the services and the items that we're providing now and making sure that we account for those in this current budget before we try to add anything new to it. And so that's really what you're going to see today is how we think this is going to kind of flatten out. It's not necessarily a flat budget. It's just the flattening out of revenues a little bit. And we did discuss that last year when I brought the budget to you, that was what we were anticipating after such high growth in the prior 2 years, is that we would see it, the normal flattening out. And so we've anticipated that, and we've modeled it, and that's really where we're at as far as making this budget a balanced budget. So in front of you today, we have a balanced budget for consideration. And this balanced budget takes into the effect the economic downturn that we're going to see, that little bit of, it's going to be a modest yet broad economic downturn. So what that means for C-Tax is right now we're already seeing C-Tax is under budget by 3% for the current year. We had budgeted it at 6% to grow, which is normal for a normal year, and it is starting to see that flattening amount. Other local agencies are seeing the same thing that we are seeing. Franchise fees right now are exceeding budget. There's 2 reasons for that. One is because it's very cold out, so electric and gas consumption is higher than in a normal year when it's not so cold. And the other reason is the electric and gas fees went up. And so we get a franchise fee based on the usage, and when those fees go up, our franchise fees go up as well. So the amount of the franchise fees that we're seeing actually is about $3 million, which makes up for what we think we're going to be under budget for C-Tax. So we're actually right where we need to be for the current year because of the franchise fees meeting that. So when we make projections for the 23-24 budget, we don't base it on where we thought we were going to be when we built the budget last year. We build it on what we know today. So for C-Tax, I'm building the budget based on where I know where I anticipate it coming in today, which is 3% below budget. So we're not anticipating growth on top of growth as we do this along, and that's what builds a sustainable budget as we move forward. Property tax is right on budget for this current year. I've built in 5.5%, which is very conservative for property tax to balance this budget. I do know that we will have some extra funding in that area as we get the final numbers in for property tax. I believe it's going to come in around more like 7.5%, but right now this is built on 5.5%. The slowing of the economy is not so much an issue as far as it's something new, because it's not new. Slowing of the economy is normal. You have those expansion periods, you have the contraction cycles. That's a normal cycle for the economy. So just because we don't have the big boom of money that we've seen in the last couple years, it doesn't mean that our economy is unstable. We're actually very stable right now. Statewide sales tax projections are 5.6% for the current year, and then for next year, they're about 2.5%. What we're actually seeing in the current year is about 4% growth, and then for next year, I projected 4% growth as well. This actually ends up at the same dollar amount statewide that the state has projected for fiscal year 23-24, because I think we're going to get a little bit less this year than what they have statewide projected, and a little bit more next year. So overall, we end up kind of at the same number. But you have to remember these are statewide numbers. It doesn't necessarily reflect our local economy as much. So although we use these as a guide, we also look at our local economy and our other local agencies around us to see what they're seeing as well, to do that trending. When we developed this budget, again, I'm going to mention it is a baseline budget. It is a balanced budget at the 5.5% with the property tax. And it includes all current staffing levels, service contracts, and the capital allocations that we've done in the past. We're maintaining the prior year increases to the department budgets. As your council will remember, we did 7% increase to all the department budgets as for service and supplies last year to help overcome some of that increase that they were seeing due to inflation for a lot of the supplies and things that they're buying. We also increased any service contracts that we know go up by 3% or 5% a year. If we know those are going up, that has been built in. General capital, we have at $4 million, the same as we did last year. And the annual maintenance funding, we're still funding that at $1 million as well for our building parks and then the fire station maintenance. And previous to last year, that funding was new last year as dedicated and ongoing as operating funding. So that's a big win for the city. Adjustments for inflation and contractual increases, as I said, are included. Some of those went up. Well, a lot of those went up. Some of them went down because if they had a new software program or something that they were using and it replaced by something else, we've made all of those adjustments within this budget. There was a significant PERS increase that was announced this year. Every 2 years, there's a potential for a PERS increase. This increase will go in effect July 1st of this year, so we have factored this significant increase into this budget. When you look at developing this budget, we have to build in everything that we already know. So this is going to give you an idea of all of the cost of living adjustment increases that are afforded in our collective bargaining agreements. So the green are the increases that went into effect in July of 22, so that's this current fiscal year. The dark blue went into effect in January, so there were a few of those bargaining groups that had kind of split COLAs during the year. And then the yellow that you see at the top, those will be effective July 1st. And so all of these amounts have been factored into this budget. So I want to just make it clear that we've tried to capture absolutely everything that we know that exists out there, and we're making sure that this budget is sustainable and resilient as we move forward. Developing this budget, one of council's goals was to increase the fund balance by 1% every year, and council's been doing that since 4 or 5 years now. So I remember this back when we were at about 11% and we went to 12, and now with this budget next year we'll be going up to 15% for the ending fund balance. And what this does is really provide that resiliency in the budget so that we have flexibility in case there are areas where revenues come in a little low or other expenses come in that are a little higher. This is where we have some flexibility and some resiliency in the budget. And you'll see in some later slides, we really did not have that years ago. So this is a really big win for the city to keep building up this fund balance. Also in here, one of council's priorities was to decrease the unfunded liabilities. So we have motor vehicle fleet, we have OPEB, which is the other post-employee benefits. And what that is the retiree medical mostly. We also have risk, workers' comp, and between all of those, we are still funding those at $22 million. We did not decrease any funding for those in this budget. When you look at the budget as a whole, this is the total budget. It's $861 million. The general fund is the largest of that. It's $320 million. This includes fund balance on this slide. So you'll see in later slides, we were just talking about revenues, but this particular one is your total budget, including fund balance. The next largest would be sewer at $227 million. If you remember last year when I was in front of you, we had a total budget of $915 million. The difference is the capital. So we have your total budget's always going to vary by the amount of capital you have each year. And so in last year's budget, we had the very large projects of the Public Safety Center and also the Moana Pool. So that's why the budget in total was $915 last year, and this year it's $861. When you look at the budget for the city by function, public safety is at $179 million of that $861. We have fund balance and reserves between all the funds of $200 million. Public Works is $269 million, and that includes Public Works and Utility Services departments, including maintenance and engineering. Culture and Recreation is at $21 million, which includes Parks and Recreation plus the Parks projects as well. And then you will see redevelopment on here at 5 million. When you look at the full-time positions by department, we have 1,437 full-time positions. The bulk of those are between fire and police. You have over 730 positions that are fire and police. So that's about half of this budget is public safety between fire and police. When you look at it as far as additional funding requests, so each department was asked to put in what they felt they needed to do absolutely everything to the best of their ability. Doesn't mean that we can always fund that, but what it means is we have a good gauge as to where we need to go. What do they feel is important to make sure they can do their jobs and provide the services to the community and also meet council's priorities. And so with the additional funding request, each department was asked to put in everything that they felt they needed to do their job appropriately. And so in the additional funding request, we had $41 million in additional requests in the general fund. We had $3.6 million in sewer and $2.4 in streets. This next slide shows you most of the requests were for additional people, which really are more expensive because they continue those expenses continue to grow over the years, but most of the requests were for people. And so if you look at this one, the blue is going to tell you the people requests. So those will be your FTEs that have been requested, and then the green are the service and supplies requested. The biggest bulk, again, are between police and fire because those are your largest departments. And so they have requested the larger percentage of the positions as well. In the general fund, in total revenues, this does not include the ending fund balance, so this is $289 million in the general fund. 36% is consolidated tax, and 26% is property tax. Those are our two biggest revenues, and then behind that you have franchise fees at 12%. And as I said, franchise fees are coming in very well this year. In the expenditure side, we have public safety is 58%, and that would be your police, fire, and dispatch. And then parks and recs at 6%, debt service at 13%, muni court at 3%, community support at 2%. So how is the general fund distributed? This is, again, just showing you the pieces of the pie. So you can really see by this that consolidated tax and property tax are the two biggest players as far as revenues for the general fund. And then franchise fees follows behind that. What is consolidated tax? I just put this in here to kind of refresh your memory that consolidated tax is made up of 6 items. The last two, number 5 and number 6, are sales tax. They're just calculated a little bit differently based on where they're collected and population. But the last 2 are your sales tax. So that would be 62% and 18%. So 80% of consolidated tax is sales tax. So that's why consolidated tax is so volatile when the economy goes up and down, because it reacts immediately to anything that's going on in the economy, because it is sales tax. Cigarette tax and liquor tax are each 1%. Government services tax, that's the tax on the motor vehicles. And then the real property transfer tax is when you purchase a home and record that. When you look at C-tax as a history, this is the one where I was talking about we're not going to see these big growths. We knew that revenues were going to start to flatten. We weren't always going to have, if you see right there in that middle column, fiscal year 21 actuals, 19% increase over fiscal year 20. So fiscal year 19 and 20, we saw between 4 and 5% increases. 21 and 22, we saw a 19% increase and a 10% increase, which are very large for this revenue source. Typically, you're going to see between 4 and 6. So we're estimating the current year to be around 4%, and then next year around 4%. So really, we're just getting back to the normal that we would see for this particular revenue source. This is just a different slide for you to kind of get an idea that C-Tax does flow a certain way each year, and it flows a certain way each month. Typically, February is your lowest month. December is your highest month. It always seems to follow the same pattern. We did know that if you'll see the dotted line on top is the adopted budget. The dark purple line that goes until December, that's our current year actuals. So you'll see that for November and December, we were below budget. We did expect December to be down quite a bit because nationwide sales were down nationwide. So we did expect that. One of the things that we do expect for January, and we should have that either tomorrow or the next day, is that we expect sales to be back up because nationwide sales were very, very high in January, and we tend to follow the same trend. So based on that information, that is how we built this budget. If we get that number in the next couple of days and it's a little different than that, then we make adjustments to this before we come back to you in May, and we make sure that we are still building this budget balanced and sustainable for you. But right now, it appears to be on track, right exactly where we're projecting it to be. For property tax, it's actually made up of several different things. Personal property tax, that is based on real property. It's not your house. Your house would be the secured real estate. Your house is the land and then the improvements on that land. That's your secured. Your personal property is everything that's not your secured property, and it's valued at the acquisition date. Centrally assessed has to do with transportation lines, and utilities, and that portion. So it's really property tax is made up of those three things. When we look at property tax over the history, the tax cap for residential is 3%, and the tax cap for commercial is 8%. I continue to add to this slide just because I think it's really important to realize where we've been and where we are now. So 2007, we were at the tax cap of 3% and 8%. We haven't reached that again until last year. Last year, we were at the 3% and 8%, and then again for next year, we're projected at the same amount. So we are trending at the tax cap highs, but we aren't seeing declines in this area. So I just think it's important to show that we've gradually gotten there because we went down and then we came back, and we've gradually gotten to the point where we're back to the tax caps. So when you look at property tax history, it hasn't really fluctuated over the last few years. From 19 even up to 24, what we're projecting anywhere from 6 to 7%. To be conservative, when I built this budget, to make sure that we were going to be able to meet all the obligations and also address concerns of being stable and financially stable going forward, I use 5.5% to build this.
May I ask a quick question? Yeah, just really quick. You keep referencing CPI, so I just want to make sure. Are you talking about the average CPI of last year? Or you mentioned CPI was a high of 9%, but then we've also heard 7.1% throughout the year. So I just want to know, in this budget, what number are you referring to?
Well, currently CPI for this budget, as far as the fee schedule, is at 6.2, and we use the Western Region CPI from December. And part of that is required by our sewer ordinance, and that's also what we use for our fee schedule as well. As far as for our projections for this, it doesn't necessarily, each line item kind of trends on its own. Like, for example, property tax doesn't necessarily trend on CPI. It trends based on new property. It trends on the tax caps, which are a little different, the 3% and the 8%. C-tax doesn't necessarily trend on CPI, and neither does franchise
Just to be
fees.
clear, you said Washoe County tax cap history, and then you said, you explained the moving average growth rate or twice CPI. As
Correct.
another use of CPI, and I just wondered what number are we using for this?
The 3% and the 8%.
Twice CPI though, what, two times?
That's kind of how they
It's the
measure
alternate
this.
calculation,
It
but I'm
is.
just wondering what that CPI is. It's 6.2? Is it 7.1? Is it 9?
For this, theirs is 8% because you can kind of take CPI from several different areas.
Okay.
And it just depends on which one you're looking at.
Okay.
For our fee schedule, we use the Western region
Okay.
and it's 6.2.
All right, thanks so much.
Okay, so general fund revenue overview. This is a new chart that I produced this year, that actually Lindsay produced this year for you. And so I like this chart because it shows you that C tax on the bottom and property tax on the bottom, those are the two big ones, and you can see the trend every year. Those are the two that are really growing. The other bands stay pretty much the same as you go year over year. They don't grow nearly as much as your C tax and property tax. They may grow, but it's not as much. You can see fines and forfeits at the top. Although we do collect revenues from that, it's a very small little portion, and it actually doesn't grow very much each year. Property tax, C tax, and building permit history. We like this chart because it shows you the relationship between C tax and property tax. As C tax reacts immediately to things going on in the economy, you can see that C tax will start to decline. But at the point that C tax is declining, which is the green line on here, property tax is still going up. Property tax has about a 2-year lag before it sees economic things that are going on in the economy. The building permit history actually kind of trends similarly to C tax, where it will react pretty immediately to economic conditions. And I want to point out on here that if you look at fiscal year 21 to what we're projecting for 24, we've stayed between 9,000 and 10,000 permits. So you're not seeing a decline in the permits over the last few years. It's staying very steady and stable. In the general fund, as far as expenses, again, it's the $289 million, and 78% of it is salary and benefits, and then the remaining portions would be service and supplies, capital, and then debt service. But the biggest portion of the general fund budget is salary and benefits. When you look at the general fund expense overview, fiscal year 21 and 22 look a little skewed as far as service and supplies because that had some of the CARES money as that passed through that. But typically, you will see very similar trending for services and supplies in that we have not increased those. First time we really increased them since I've been here was last year, that's 7%. So you see a little bit of growth in that big blue line. But the biggest portion that you see growing is that green band because it's salary and benefits, and we are about 80% people, and that is typical for a service organization. The little dotted line that you see on here shows you the number of full-time FTEs that were adopted with each budget, and so that's going to show you that we have grown and we've been able to grow over these last few years. Fund balance history. This is so important for a resilient budget here because you need a fund balance in order to be able to bounce back during those times when things are uncertain or things come up. You have to have a fund balance to go back on. And so you'll see here during fiscal year 10 and 11, we were down to 3% and 2% at those points. And I really want to say that council has, by making this a priority, it's really made this a budget that is sustainable going forward and building this going forward. And so we're growing this budget to 15% for next year for the fund balance. And this is just a huge accomplishment from where we were, 10 years ago. Now for the 10-year forecast, this one is very interesting. Salary and wages are going to be in your green bar. The blue bar, again, is our employee benefits, and then service and supplies are in that kind of yellowy bar, and then capital's in the pink bar. This is the 10-year forecast, and it's based on very conservative adjustments for revenues going forward, anywhere from 2 to 5% for C tax, depending on the year. So the revenues are very conservative. The expenditures estimate that we would have additional COLAs for employees. Built into this, I have 2.5% for employees going forward, just as a good average. And then also I've built in PERS increases every 2 years, assuming that PERS is going to continue to go up as we move along here. And then I did build in all of the debt service that we currently have outstanding on the general fund. And I also built in, starting in fiscal year 26, in anticipation of potentially, if at some point we decide we need to get a loan, we need to get a bond for the fire station, the new fire headquarters, it's built into fiscal year 26. And I estimated about $3.5 million for debt service for that, just based on the current debt that we have for the one for the public safety center and the pool. So this is built into that. Your revenues are on the top in that line. You can see it is sustainable as we move along here. And in the estimated column, I want to point out over there the capital outlay, that pink bar, that larger pink bar of capital that you see there. That's actually $10 million. And that is from savings that we have in current year estimates for our salary savings for during the year when we've had vacancies and open positions. We have savings there. And then we also have additional revenues in business license that are coming in higher. And we have some additional revenues that are kind of one-time, either reimbursements or, for example, from the franchise fee audit. That's additional funding that was not allocated out to anything else. So we have $10 million there. And what I'm presenting here to you is that we could use that $10 million to start the funding for the fire station for the headquarters. So that would be the start from the savings from this current year. And then moving forward, we're building a plan to be able to do that. This is, again, the 10-year forecast, but this is going to show you the total fund balance. So it shows you over that 10 years, we still remain around the anywhere from 14.5 up to almost 16% in fund balance, which is exactly where we want to be. So when you see that gap up there where we're hitting almost the 16%, that's telling you that we have additional resources in those years. So we are not projecting it out that we can't afford to build any more positions or add police or add public safety in some of these years. We would have spots in these years to add, even with very conservative estimates. We can still afford to add positions in those out years. And that is the end of the general fund. So I want to open it up to questions.
Ms. Van Buren, I'm going to start us off and then we'll look to my colleagues, but I have a couple of thoughts about the presentations. I was taking notes and it'll be a little scattershot. The first is a general thanks, and I'm sure that each of the members will echo my general thanks to you and your team for the work that goes into us. I know that a budget for us is a period of time during which we have certain meetings and obligations, but you are living the budget every day. And your team is in budget cycle all year round, and you're revising, you're augmenting, you're doing all those things. And I just want to say thank you to the team because it is the most complex work that probably this body will undertake. And I want to certainly share with my colleagues that I'm a lawyer, I'm not an economist, I don't pretend to be one on TV. So I look to people who have expertise in the field. Obviously, we all read the news and some of the indicators look challenging at times, but other days people are very excited and bullish on the economy. It depends on where you get your news. Some people get their news from blogs, other people from their Aunt Hilda. I tend to look to experts, so thank you for that. Second, I noticed that we have a balanced budget for the second time and I think in the last 30 years. Is that correct? Or maybe it's a little fewer than that, but it's close.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, that's a big deal. So that's a high-level takeaway. Second is your slide about the general fund balance, I think is also something that's very encouraging because that tells me that you have put us on a path to sustainability and resiliency. So I want to sort of call that out. The third is that, as I understand it, the baseline budget that you have created for us, and these slides lead us to look at, it maintains current staffing levels service contracts and capital allocations, right? So that's just sort of a baseline. It also includes all the wage increases, as you've indicated, that are required by our CBAs, sort of changes in retirement and contracted for increases. So I think that's a very good sign. Fourth is the projected budget includes an increase in the general fund reserves. And I think, again, this tells me that we're trying to plan for a sustainable future, and we're also being cautious given the uncertainty and the volatility that seems to be baked into the U.S. economy. So I appreciate that. Fifth, I suppose, is my general statement, which is that it is good that we are thinking about investments we have already made. Obviously, a number of the presentations later today will be about that, but I want to call that out because I think that, to me, is very telling sign of the health and resiliency, again, of the city. And then the last thing I'll say in the time that I have remaining is I heard you say, but I'm not sure it was highlighted as well as it might need be, which was that the central station, you have already essentially, we'll call it squirreled away $10 million for that central station. Is that what I'm to take away from that last kind of point?
That is correct.
Yeah, that's
And that's
incredible.
just savings from the current year, and then also some of the revenues coming in higher, not including franchise fees, because that's kind of making up for our C-tax,
Yeah,
so.
that is, I think, something worth celebrating.
And
So
that's
thank
really
you.
kind of how we started, when we started to do the Public Safety Center and the pool as well.
Okay, let's go now. It looks like I've got folks in the queue, and so I can see that they are. I'm going to start with Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Thank you, Vicki, for being here. A couple questions. On page 5, or on your slide number 5, I heard you say that the annual maintenance funding is $1 million, and that was something that was new.
It was new last year. Previously, we had it as general capital, so we would have, say, a capital budget of $2 million, but $1 million of it was already committed to general maintenance. And so last year, what we did was we built this in as ongoing. So we have a general capital of $4 million, and we continue to fund the maintenance as an operating expense. So they don't have to come ask for it every year. It's part of their budget. But it's really important to draw it out here because it wasn't something that we were doing for a very long time.
That was my question. It wasn't done before last year?
We were doing it, but we were taking it from the other general capital projects. So if you only had $2 million to go to general capital projects, $1 million of it would have been just for maintenance. Whereas now we have dedicated funding for general capital and we have dedicated funding for maintenance.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah, it's
positive.
it's a huge step forward.
Right. Once we get a little bit later in the presentation, probably we'll talk about that a little bit
Okay.
more. My second question, I think it comes from slide 7, and Mr. Vice Mayor talked a little bit about this. When you say we have a reserve level of 15%, what does that actually mean? Is that 15% of the budget is, like you said, in case something comes up, or?
Thank you for the question. It's 15% of our prior year operating expenses.
Okay.
So it does not include capital or our debt service. It's just to operate. And 15% is 16% is equivalent to about 2 months of operating expenses. And that is typically where you want to be, is the 16% mark, and we are almost there. And when you think about such a large budget, you think 2 months, that's really not a lot, but really that's where we need to be as far as an organization. That is typical.
Okay. Those are my questions for right now. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Ms. Breckus, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Could you bring up slide 2, Clerk, while I'm introducing my comments? Thank you very much for your presentation and for your team. I do
Absolutely.
appreciate how much goes in. I do have a master's in public administration with a lot of public budgeting, and this is one of my favorite times, and I'm just in awe of how it's done every year by people like you and organizations all over. So thank you very much. Now, you asked for some feedback on, flat budget, but on
Absolutely.
the capital. And I want to express once again my concern that the lack of this body doing strategic planning makes it hard for us to express what our priorities are. Budgets are an expression of your values and your priorities. And the fact that we've had a very broad priority goal now running, it came out of a workshop in September or August of 2019. There's only 3 people in this dais right now who are at that meeting. And when we left that meeting, we were going to have an annual work program, and we were going to have an annual strategic setting goal workshop. We haven't done any of that. And that is very problematic. And I think that's why all of a sudden space whales are bought, or, other things happen. Positions are added, like an urban economist that we never even heard of. So the answer to you from someone who's been sitting here and loves budgeting so much is, without taking each one of those into a workshop that is driven by this body to talk about what the annual priorities are, the marching orders with the budget to our city manager, and I've asked him for years now to convene us in his strategic plan. We really aren't doing budgeting properly, in my view. So that's number one. And could you go to slide number 25 too? Also next, the fund balance. I hope to get a little bit more to the revenues coming in the limited time that we combine ourselves to. But also, I think there's some information really not great. I want to get to it a little bit more of understanding our cost increases. But, I'm sorry, is it, what was the one with the ending fund balance? I thought it
This
was
one?
25.
25.
Yeah, okay. So to my colleagues, because I'm the only one sitting at this dais who came into the office with the FY12 budget, which were terrifying days, sitting the finance director telling how he was managing cash flow, okay? So look how much it dropped from FY6 to FY11, 12, okay? That means this is all staff pretty much. A third of them are gone if you have to get to that point. And probably more, because this is not mostly public safety sitting here. So 40% of this staff is gone, and gone in an 18-month period. So that's why this is the time, the lag, this is the time to really have your head in the game of what the volatility of sales tax could do to your organization. Now, we're at 15%, but look at that. They went from 12 to 2, and percentage is really your variables, even though, you got the graph doesn't quite show that because it's in real dollars over on your y-axis. But, they were at 12%. They went to 2% with a crashing of sales tax. And so I really think we need to approach this budget with that mindset. And then the last point, if I may, is your projections, which are statewide, those were based on July 2022 economic forum projections, correct?
For the statewide projections?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I think their projections are current because those don't actually come out until February. So we just received those in February.
Okay. I did some background and saw that they do their work in July. So I'll get, I have to yield the floor, but I do want to get a little bit more to the C-Tax understanding. Thank you.
Did you have a question, Ms. Breckus, about C-Tax?
Yeah. So last year, and I am working on all of my materials from last year too. So last year, you projected a 6% C-Tax increase.
Correct.
And it is coming in 3% below.
Correct.
And so you're building this budget on a flat line of that 3% or 3% upon that 3%?
This budget we're coming in actually 4% above last year is where we're tracking, because if you remember last year, June came in much less than what we anticipated in June. There was that little dip where people were traveling out of the area and such, so we didn't have as much C-Tax in the area, and that it really was shown because it bumped right back up in July, because as people could travel, they did in June. So when we built last year's budget, we built it on where we were estimating to end the year. So it was estimated to end a little bit higher.
Yeah.
So when you look at this current year, we're actually trending 4% above last year.
Well, here's what I'm going to need to see to feel comfortable. And I looked out there and I didn't see it. I am going to need to see what Sparks, Washoe County, take a couple jurisdictions, Carson, are projecting on C-Tax for their budgets.
They're
and I know
doing-
you communicate with them.
They're doing anywhere from 2 to 4%.
I'm going to need to see exactly what they're putting out there.
They are actually not giving out their final projections because they're waiting for the January C-Tax to come in.
Tomorrow.
And so,
Yeah.
yes, and they're building their budgets just like we are right now based on the most available data that we have. And again, like I said, when that comes out tomorrow, we will relook at our and evaluate ours as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Breckus. Ms. Dewar.
Sure, mostly some comments, couple questions. Great job, really informative the way you presented and explained the different funds. I want to dive a little bit deeper on just a couple of them. So first of all, kudos on the fund balance. I came in where we had the 7%, 2014. And so as soon as you said that, I knew that we were already twice as much. And we have exerted so much fiscal discipline to get here.
Absolutely.
So kudos for that. That is 2 months of operating. You have to know if all the money stops coming in, if huge demands are made either on workers' comp or a tranche of people retire and we have to pay out benefits or, any of those kind of things can take a hit here, unexpected hit. So kudos. I was really pleased to hear about the maintenance separating. Can you I'm not sure I fully grasped it, even though you explained it to Ms. Taylor. Can you take one more shot at it? Is what you're saying,
Absolutely.
you're setting aside $1 million just for maintenance, separate and apart for capital projects. Is that
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Well, I'm really pleased. Many of the projects that I pull off of the agenda are maintenance projects. And I have kind of hammered on that because if we don't maintain our assets, we lose our assets. And then it's just incredibly hard to dig back out. Roof fails, we have water damage. You're not just replacing the roof, you're now fixing the water damage, that kind of thing. So really, really happy to see that. It was interesting, your comment about the $10 million for fire. I was a little confused. You kind of glossed over that a bit. I didn't know where that was coming from.
It's coming from savings that we have in the current year because when we build this budget, first we have to build where we think we're going to end this current year in order to know where the fund balance will be at for next year.
Right.
And so we have savings in employee benefits and in positions because we did hold some positions vacant
But
during
that's
the
one
year.
time.
It is one time, and this would be for a one-time item,
Oh,
which would
only
be
the
the fire
10 million
station.
is only one time?
Yes, it would
Okay.
be one time going
Okay,
forward.
that was what I think I
And
thought
we,
you
and we
said
do
every
have
year.
a few revenues coming in a little bit higher as well. We have business licenses that were coming in
Okay.
a little higher too.
How long do you hope to, 10 million, do we have our estimate of what the fire station might be?
We do not. This is kind of, I compare this to where we started when we, what seems like a very long time ago when we thought we wouldn't get here with Public Safety
Sure.
Center and the pool. This is the starting point for that process.
Okay.
So we start to put away the money and then we see how much it's going to come in and we see that we can either bond or figure out other revenue sources or things, but this is the starting point of figuring that out.
In one of your 10-year projections, you showed a 2.5% COLA, you said. What are you planning for this year?
This year is all
2.5%?
this year is all dictated based on the bargaining groups because they all have contracts.
Right,
So they all have contracts that go into effect July 1. So
Right.
all of that is already built in.
right.
But for the 10-year model going
Okay.
out forward, typically it's around 2.5%,
Right.
3%. I built in 2% going forward for both salary and benefits. And then I built in another 2% every other year for PERS.
Okay. I have just
increases.
a quick more question, if I may. So bottom line, you're saying we have multi-year labor contracts, so we don't have
Correct.
to do it this year. It's already budgeted in. or
Correct.
Planned and budgeted in. That's really good. So my next question is just on page 10. We had staffing. You showed staffing, and here's something you don't have to answer now, but I would like to understand this. We have city manager at 120 employees. So most organizations, I see, those employees would be distributed out to other cost centers, and the city manager positions would be, 10, 20, 30, something like that. Just the key staff and the key support staff for that operation. But the rest would be allocated somewhere else. And I wondered, and again, you don't have to answer now, but I hope What's that?
I
I can
can,
answer it for you.
You can?
I can
Okay.
answer part of it.
Or
Part
you
of this
can?
is,
Okay.
it's a supervision thing, so it's not necessarily that all of these are direct reports to the city manager. You have a number of divisions that are set up in there. And
Yeah.
a lot of those were at the request of council, like the diversity and equity group that we have.
Sure.
We have sustainability in there, there's code enforcement. There's a number of divisions in there. There's housing is located in there. It does not mean they're all necessarily direct reports to the city manager.
Well, I think I hear you. I did see though that code enforcement was its own one. It has 17 positions here. What I would like to see ultimately is to allocate those, all of them, to a department. Maybe DEI goes into a department called administration, but that the city manager, and it's not about reporting span of control. It's about budgeting area, function area, and to have it be one of the largest, I think it's just a different kind of thing.
If you'll recall, last year, we presented it slightly differently. We had sort of the city manager, and then we had the, for lack of a better term, the bullets of all
Sure.
the many functional areas
Yeah.
underneath. This chart becomes a bit of an eye chart. If we do it that way, we can make that adjustment.
It would
as we
be
move
just
forward.
helpful, I think, just if I want to make sure though, do you budget in those function areas or do you
We
put all
budget
the
in
money
those
in the?
function areas.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. All right, thank you.
And the other thing I wanted to note in here is 55 of those positions are dispatch, because dispatch is supervised under the city manager's umbrella,
Okay,
per se. So really, 55 of those are dispatch.
okay.
And in your binders, they are broken out between those divisions. So when you go
Okay.
to the city manager section in your binder, you will have all the various divisions that are located within there, and we do budget them by those divisions.
Are we going to do a second round or should I say
Yes,
my
happy
last
to
thing?
have a second
Okay.
round. Do you have one last?
I have one last thing. I just wanted to put in support for, if we don't do it annually, I would like to see us do it biannually, a strategic plan. We do it at every other organization, whether it's TUMWA or RTC. It's the role of the board both to do this budgeting and also set these strategic objectives. So I'd love to hear a plan and understand we're not doing it this year, but we should slate it and maybe try to do it in the fall of next year. 9 months from now or whatever, so that we set ourselves up for the budget and we just have that look and our new council members have a say too, that kind of thing.
Great.
Okay?
Any additional questions at this time? I don't see any hands.
Oh, I have mine.
Councilmember Breckus.
And also,
But I think Ms. Ebert wants to go, and I've already had a
No
chance.
problem. I'm
Okay.
hoping we can try to use the system that we've set up.
Yeah.
Just makes it easier to
I
manage.
thought I did. I am on, but so if you're not seeing it, maybe we have a malfunction. But I will start, I too noted the 120 FTE in the city manager's office. I brought that up last budget. I brought it up during the manager's evaluation. I'm not sure it's a budget issue. It's more of an organizational issue, which is something that you would hope a body like ours would get to at a strategic plan organization, to understand strategy, what goals, what problems we're trying to solve with dispatch where it is, code enforcement where it is. It's been very puzzling and problematic to me, and I haven't had the opportunity with the manager to discuss it further because he has not made himself available to me. But I will mention on the FTEs, from what I can tell, in 2022 to 2023, so last budget year, it looked like we added 108 positions. We went from 1315 to 1423.
That is correct.
That's correct. And then this one, we're not adding positions, but we're at 1437. So somehow 14 positions got added mid-budget year. And I don't know if you have the activation coordinator in one of these 14 that we just, council just gave direction to last week. But that's 14 positions that came through on augmentations, or all of a sudden you get an email that there's a new body here, like a city economist. And I'm really troubled with mid-year budget increments, and that's maybe 2 million in people, maybe not, I don't know. If you put 100, that's, where they come in at the level. In addition to upgrades and position classifications. So I just want to point that out to the council that we're spending all this time and focus on budgeting, but mid-year, 14 positions come through, some without any discussion here. And that's just not the way, if you read the county agendas, any position, new position, reclassification, those go to the commission. And I think we were a little astray on that. But I do want to understand So I have a slide from 21, 22, and salaries were 235 million in the general fund. Slide 23 here was your salary one. It was broken up by departments, I think. And we're at 289. Okay? And so that growth from 89 to 35 is 54 million. How much is the general fund growing this cycle?
I don't have that right in front of me, but we did have that significant PERS increase. So
Yes.
benefits did go up quite a bit, and then we do have all the COLAs.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the number should be here somewhere. I think it was only like 20 million. So, you know, I'm just calling out big macro numbers is salaries in the general fund are going up 54 million, and the general fund itself is only growing, what, 26 million?
Let's see, here it is. So
Yeah.
it's,
So I'm struggling how this balance, I mean, you know, I dispute the word balance when I see you doing position freezes, you know, mid-year position freezes. That's not a balanced budget in any way I've understood. But I think, is it true to say that salary costs have grown 54 million and that for the general fund, and that the general fund itself is only growing by, what is it? The general fund total is growing how much?
let's see, that's 10-year.
20 million?
Where's the total revenues? This one.
I mean, that's a disaggregate.
Doesn't have the total on it.
But I thought it was
Well,
289 to,
it's obviously growing proportionately because we have a balanced budget. So it's able to grow and sustain our normal operations and also increase for those increases that occur to either labor contracts or inflation.
but if you're only growing the general fund by 20 million, how can you afford 54 million in salary increases? How are you doing that?
Well, I don't see 54 million in salary increases. I see the estimate at 209, and then I see next year's projected at 226.
Oh, I thought it was 254.
No, 226 for salary and benefits.
Ms. Van Buren, I'll take the opportunity, now that Ms. Brexton's time has expired. Look, I want you to appreciate something from my perspective. This is not a gotcha scenario.
Absolutely.
And when people just start throwing out numbers wildly and they pull out files from 1972 and they open them up and they quote a number, look, we're going to stick to the facts, right? And we're going to stick to the charts that you provided. If there are additional charts, I think we're happy. I'm sure you would be more than happy to create more charts. But I think it is a distraction because what ultimately happens is people will pick at the minutia of a page and then they will make an extrapolation without the support to do it. And then you're doing your best to answer the questions as they come and on the fly, but these numbers get confusing at times. So I thank you for staying engaged because I think
Absolutely.
that's part of the difficulty here. And of course, the public is watching. Everything we do is in the transparent light of day, and these meetings are recorded for posterity's sake. And also, of course, people look at the meeting minutes. So I think you've done a good job of utilizing the graphs and drawings and different formats. You're telling us a lot of information in multiple different ways, right?
Absolutely.
Some of the data points get extended over different slides, but are all related to the same data set. At the end of the day, of course, what our public wants to know is that with a high degree of certainty, you are confident in the budget projections that you're making based on the best available evidence you have at the time to say that we're headed in the right direction. We continue to be fiscally responsible. The decisions we're making are ones that cities have to make. I heard comments made about more strategic planning. Look, I am tired of all that government speak, and I think I mentioned it during the last meeting. Yes, planning is an important concept for what we do, but if we do it every other day, I'm not sure we're getting anywhere with that. Our priorities have not changed during the time I've been on council. They've been relatively the same over, I I think, a lifetime. It's public safety. It's providing for more parks and recreational opportunities. It's charting a sustainable future for our budget, right? Those things are consistent over time. Budgets are definitely a reflection of our values. I value the work that we are doing as a city in a number of different areas, certainly with regard to those things that are priorities, public safety being one of them. We've made commitments there. But I also think it is sort of odd to continually say we should be reevaluating those things ad infinitum, because it doesn't lead us to any better policy decisions. And so I am interested in having those strategic discussions as they arise. I also think it's odd to sort of characterize the growth in certain areas as being not directed by council. Obviously, we have a city manager who has earned very high praise in his last several performance review, and we told the city manager, start out by figuring out who's on what floor, and then go remake the organization in a way that can move us forward. And so some of the comments continue to be troubling to me, deeply troubling to me that they be made in that way. But here we are, and I thank you again for the materials that you provided. Let me see if we have anybody else in the queue. I think Ms. Ebert, did you have some questions?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
A couple. If you go to slide 8, I just had a couple brief questions. On slide 8, it says the general fund is $32,689,905. But then when you go to slide 13, it shows the total revenue for the general fund is $289 million.
Correct.
Just wondering why, like, what the...
This is just total revenue, and when we go back to this slide, this includes ending fund balance. So the little note at the bottom.
Got it. Okay. All right. Also, I would like to know when, you know, as a new council member, I would be able to provide feedback on upcoming budgets. When we,
As far as, I guess I'm not following.
I wasn't able to contribute any feedback, you know, for this budget. I know Devin doesn't want to have a lot of budget meetings, but I'd like to be a part of.
Absolutely. And this is really what we're here for today.
Okay.
Is to get that feedback
Okay.
and hear your concerns or thoughts on how we're putting it together and where you would like to see it different or the same.
Okay.
This is that opportunity, yes.
All right. And then another question for different debts. When we use the general fund, is it just a general fund? Do we have like different accounts for that?
As far as debt service?
Yeah.
In the general fund, we only, for debt service, we have the Axon agreement. That's that medium-term agreement that council approved this year. And then we also have payment for that is transferred over to the debt service fund for the fire apparatus program as well.
Okay.
So is that 54 million that's listed on this chart?
This debt service is showing you all debt in the city in that debt service one, and except for sewer, because the sewer debt is within the sewer fund. But this debt service has your retract debt, it has the fire apparatus, it has the public safety center, the $60 million debt. It has those debts. The only debts that would not be in there would be your RDA or your sewer specific debts.
Okay, that was it. Thank you.
I just want to,
Ms. Breckus.
yeah, you know, I can't remember what slide it was. It was the one with the FYs. So, is the budget that you're working on and you're calling it estimated, is that as we've augmented?
That's where we're estimating we're going to end this year. So
Okay,
it's
so
not
it's
the
not-
augmented budget. We actually
okay.
go in and look at every single line and estimate where that line's going to come out at the end of the year. That's the only way that we can accurately project where our fund balance is going to end the year and start the next year.
Well, the question is, because that's not a real budget, that's an estimate, are you doing growth off of what we adopted in May or our last augmentation, or where
No,
you
it's
estimate?
based on our estimate, because the growth would be based on what we're actually seeing during the year. So say we have property tax estimated, if we have a budget of $50 million for property tax, but it's only coming in at 48 million, and that's where we think we're gonna end, that's where we're gonna build the budget for the next year.
Okay, okay.
So if I may,
Hold on one second. Ms. Breckus, are you finished?
Yeah, if we could pause for a sec, I'm gonna try and find that slide to understand that better.
Ms. Van Buren, are all budgets estimates? Aren't all budgets a tool when we project what we're going to do in the future? We are making educated guesses and
For
estimates.
building a next year budget, yes, you have to estimate where you're gonna end this current year, because we don't come in exactly on budget on every single item where we're at. We have to look at every single line, where is it trending, where is it gonna come in, and what's that gonna look like for next year? We don't necessarily look at our current year budget really, I wouldn't say at all, but we don't look at it for purposes of this. We need to know where everything's coming in, salary and benefits, everything, in order to know how that's going to trend going
And there are
forward.
thousands of data points to be considered.
We have over 100 funds. They roll up into what you see here.
Ms. Stewart, I apologize. I've overlooked Mr. Martinez a number of times because I'm not as adept with the technology yet. So let me go to Mr. Martinez and then we'll come to you.
well, I just wanted to clarify, budget estimated but actual. Maybe the terms could all help us. You know, you're trying to
Sure.
get to an actual,
Sure.
what we're actually gonna spend.
Yes. And I think some of these kind of show you when I get to these, because we have prior year actuals for fiscal year 19 up until fiscal year 22. We have actuals for all of those.
Wanted to-
Then we do an estimate for the current year, and then we base our projection on the estimate, not on our actual budget that we're doing this year. Do we compare our estimate to the budget? Yes, because when we come back to you to do the augmentation for the third quarter and the fourth quarter, if there are areas where we're either over or under, we may need to adjust those in the current year, but for projecting for next year, we really need to know what we're actually seeing.
Okay, Mr. Martinez, we'll go to you. And sorry, it's taken me a little bit of time to get over there.
All good. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Mayor. Vicky, I just want to echo some of the things that my fellow council members have said, and good morning to all staff being here. I appreciate you being judicious and engaged in the process, and I know a lot of work is done not just on your own, but the conversations that you have with every department to try to understand what the needs are and how we can plan to better serve our community, being a service organization, as you keep referring to. I just have one question about slide number 12, if we can go to that. I was just curious if the numbers on those graphs at the top of the bars, are those the amount of additional staff that are being requested for next year? Or
Correct.
can you just help me understand this graph a little bit more?
Yes.
Thank you.
So these are the additional items that the various departments put together as things they thought would be the best to serve the community. If they could have their big wish list of everything they need to do their job, this is what it would look like. Obviously, we can't get to it unless we actually know where we're heading. So this is a good starting point to know where are the real needs and what are those needs going forward. We may not be able to fund all of them or even some of them at certain points, but if we don't have a plan, we're not going to get there. And so you'll see at the top, the blue bar are the people that they've requested, and the top just gives you the number. So, for example, police requested another 102 full-time positions, fire 36 positions. And then the little green bars would be service and supplies, whether that's contracts or increase in training and travel or things like that.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate you mentioned that. I know part of this conversation is for us to provide a little bit of direction and our thoughts on that. So I'll take the opportunity to do that right now. And I will say that I think some of the requests that are being asked from some of the departments, I know I would support. So something like the asks for Parks and Rec, fire, police, obviously making sure that we are safe and maintaining a safe community. I think those are things that I am looking for in the next budget cycle. So I appreciate the opportunity to share those thoughts with you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Breckus, you said you needed.
I'm
more
ready to
time.
move on.
Okay.
Well,
and
I'll just
Ms.
have a
Ms.
follow-up
Stewart.
to Mr. Martinez's comment. But to be clear, on this chart, this is what they've asked for.
Correct.
But what have you, in total, this is 100, another 220 or something. What is actually included in this budget? 10
We
new
have not
positions?
built any new positions. This
Zero.
is just, yes, this is a
Okay, so
baseline,
I thought we should say that.
correct.
Because this is what they think they need to run the agency effectively in today's world. With today's population, today's demands on maintenance, policing, which I tend to agree, I hear it all the time from my constituents, wanting even just speed limit enforcement. You know, they're like, if I have to follow the speed limit, so should this guy, so should that gal. And so they think constituents feel it's unfair, and they feel like we need this for safety. But to be clear, this is 220 requests, or approximately, but we've put in 0.
At this point, yes.
What point would you,
Once we finalize the revenues and we go back through the expenses one more time and we repencil everything out, we will bring the manager's recommendations back to you on May 2nd. And it
May
will be based on the conversations we have here, the priorities of council, and what we can actually afford in the budget and sustain.
okay, that's a super helpful clarification for this process.
And all of the additional funding requests are in your binder, and there's a tab for them. So maybe we can fund something at 50,000 that they've requested, but we may not be able to fund something else. So there are a lot of items in there, so you're welcome to look through that and see if there are things that stand out to you.
Well, a follow-up. So in May, though, we're very close to within 2 weeks of having to have an adopted budget. And so when should we opine, to sort of my colleague's question here too, and Mr. Martinez's question, when do we opine on where we'd like to see these positions?
So if you'll indulge me for just a moment.
Yes.
One of the opportunities we thought we had this year for improvement in the budget workup process was through the AFRs, the additional funding requests. If you were to go back and look historically at the departmental AFRs, what you would see is they sort of jog all over the place. They don't always maintain a consistent trajectory.
Sure.
And so the mission for each department and division this year was exactly as you expressed, right? So what do you need to perform this task in a way that we're proud of, that delivers the service that the community expects, that is reflective of the goals and priorities of this city council? And this is what came out of that. Obviously, we can't fund all of this.
Right.
So what we're looking for today is an understanding of, if we have an opportunity to fund either additional positions or programs or enhance funding for existing positions.
Even if
and
it's just
programs,
10, not 100, 220.
where would the council prefer for that investment to be made?
And then when would you like to do it? At the end of this meeting, at this juncture of general fund? When would you like to hear from us on that?
Anytime. This is a
Anytime.
workshop for you to ask questions and let us know what your thoughts are.
Okay, well, until we just had this conversation, I wasn't particularly clear on this, and so this is very helpful. Thank you.
Maybe, Mr. Manager, and if you would please just really get close to the mic. Can you, look, we saw Van Buren Fest located throughout the office. Fantastic. I bought the t-shirt, I think. And so maybe it would be helpful for you to give an overview of, like, today we're doing X, tomorrow we're going to do Y. By thus and such a date, we're going to have a budget. And that would be helpful, I think, to a couple of our members. The other thing I'll say is, look, I've been here now for 4 years, and we've done the budget 4 different times. And that's because we have been trying to build the better mousetrap, right? And you, I think, Ms. Van Buren, have collectively taken our input. And so, like, I'll give just one example to highlight it for our colleagues. You know, there had been a moment of time where we didn't have the entire org chart. And then there were sub-departments that weren't providing a visual representation of their department. So we asked for that. So now you're providing it, right? So I think the evolution of the budget over the 4 years that I've been involved in the budget process has been a good one, but it also is a moving target, because this year some members may say, well, I would like X. And then, of course, we do that for next time, right? Or we try to dodge and weave. So perhaps, Mr. Manager, you might give some general guidance as to help us all to know when we should say, you know, I want more folks in HR. And we'll pick on them because they're a great group, but a small one. But when will the people be, and tell us what we're going to be doing.
Sure. I mean, I'd echo your sentiment. I too am extraordinarily excited about Van Buren Fest. But the broader point is to bring a base level of knowledge of the process and the intricacy of the process, and how long it takes to build a budget to the broader organization. Not every dollar is the same. Not every dollar is available to be spent on any old function that we wish, no matter how much we would all like that to be true. One of the challenges that we have in budget workup is that, as Director Van Buren mentioned earlier, the revenue projections that we get from the state and from our neighboring agencies, they just don't show up until, as early as this morning in some cases. And so building you a document and a presentation from which, we have all the numbers dialed is extraordinarily difficult this early in the process. And so what this is a base level projection from which, as we get the revenue information, the projections that come in from the myriad sources from which we draw, we have a starting point. If there is some increment above and beyond sustaining what we are already doing, that presents new opportunities for us either to enhance the services that we provide or to embark on new journeys without disrupting the services and the programs that we already have in place. At this juncture, the broader message from Director Van Buren is that in the general fund, to the extent those opportunities exist this year, they will be relatively slight as compared to the last two budgets that we've worked through. With that expectation
Mr. Thornley,
managed,
again, don't gild the lily. You're saying that it's a flat budget, and so the expectation should not be that we're going to be able to add 102 persons in our police department, even if we wanted them.
that is correct.
Okay, so I think that's an important point, and I didn't mean to disrail your train of thought, but I don't want to talk around it. I just want to say what it is in plain speak.
No, and I think that is important clarification in terms of what we're saying. Now, that said, I believe we do expect, and Director Van Buren did say, that she believes that there will be some marginal opportunity as we better determine the revenues and sharpen the pencils on expenses and come to you with a final document. And so whether it's today, whether it's through the briefing process, whether it's through our conversations, we're accepting feedback on which areas of priority are most important to each of you.
Okay.
And from that, we will come back with a recommendation and proposal, and you'll have the opportunity to give us the up or down.
Okay, Ms. Van Buren, I think you are to now a moment in time where you were going to switch gears and go into the next step of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor. I do want to take a moment here just to say that one of the things that, Vice Mayor, you mentioned that we make changes as we go along and we do these things a little different based on council input. Many of the years that we've had here, I've heard the council input that you don't want to see just the general fund at this point. You want to see all the funds at this point. So this is the first year you are seeing all the funds at this point. We worked very hard to roll everything up and make estimates for all the funds to now. The general fund obviously is the heaviest lift for us. But the other funds, as I mentioned, we have over 100 funds that roll up into what you see here, and it's all a very heavy lift. But based on the feedback, I thought it was very important that you have an idea of where we're at on those funds as well. So you have that here today. So we're going to move into the special revenue funds. The special revenue funds mean those funds are restricted to a specific purpose. And it's by law, those are restricted. So in the general fund, you can use those funds pretty much discretionary. These in the special revenue funds have to be used for a specific purpose. That's why they're accounted for differently. In here, you have HUD and state housing funds. You have your CDBG funds are in that as well. We have the Community Assistance Fund where we have a lot of grants. This used to be where the Community Assistance Center is, but since we don't have that anymore, this is really a lot of other grants that come through there, VA grants that Monica and her team manage. We have the Street Fund. That's actually a special revenue fund. That one is dedicated for streets and street maintenance. We have performance deposits, drainage facility, fund, and those are really deposits that we receive, and then they are reimbursed based on some type of performance. The room tax fund is a special revenue fund. We'll get into that one a little bit more. And then we have courts and drug forfeiture. Those are specific to courts and then to police, and they have restrictions on how those monies can be used.
Yeah, I'm going to make a question here. You know, I think I brought this up last year about the Community Assistance Center because it, you know, like you said, we used to run the center there. And are the revenues going into that the same as the HUD and State Housing Fund?
No, they're different funds.
Well,
Mostly in the community assistance now are the VA grants.
the VA grants.
Yes.
I,
But this is actually not the center. This is actually mislabeled on here. This fund we only use for community assistance at this point.
Not the center.
yeah,
No, it's not the center. It's just mislabeled.
I think it would be really helpful for everyone to understand the difference between the revenue sources, which are grant and origin, in the HUD and State Housing Fund and the Community Assistance Center. Like, and, you know, how those fluctuate. Because is the HUD and State Housing Fund include all CDBG?
The CDBG funds are under the HUD and state housing.
And
But
then
there are various different
I'm gonna
funds
ask
that
a
roll
question
up
too.
into these.
Okay.
They're accounted for in different ways. These are just the various groupings.
and when you say the Community Assistance Center, there's not that many VA funds. So I don't know what you,
This is 100%. This isn't comparing each to each other. This is just saying as a percentage, the service and supplies are in that one, would be the blue, and the yellow are salary and benefits that are charged to it. It's not a dollar for dollar across this. This is
Yeah.
just splitting how the
Yeah.
expenditures are as a percentage of the fund.
Okay. Thanks, Ms. Breckus. I also had a question. If we adopt a stormwater fee, would this be a special revenue fund that would have its own bar later?
Stormwater would be an enterprise on its own.
Not special revenue.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to understand the difference. All right, thanks. Back to you, Mr. Vice Chair. To continue on the presentation.
So on the street fund, I'm just going to dive into a couple of these that are much larger. The street fund, it is, as I mentioned, a special revenue fund. It's about $35 million. 67% of it is property tax. This is a property tax override that was approved and goes directly for street maintenance. And then we also have fuel taxes as 22% of the revenues that come in. On the right side, you'll see the expenditures and how those funds are actually used. Most of it is in capital projects, in maintaining the streets and doing street maintenance. So it's 62% is capital projects for the street fund. And then we have 11% for pavement maintenance, and then traffic engineering at 10%. This is also where you'll see your snow and ice removal, where they've been very busy this year.
may I ask a quick question on that?
Ms. Breckus, remember, we're going to try to let her get through the presentation, and then we'll come back to you. I don't mind giving you extra time, or just flag the notes that you have, and we'll get to it.
So when we look at the street fund, I went ahead and we prepared this for you to give you an idea of, gives you the idea of the size of the expenditures compared to each other. So you'll see that capital outlay is the largest piece of this. It does get larger on the right-hand side because we budget for doing X amount of projects, but they don't necessarily all occur in one year. So as you see over the years, it kind of flattens out. So you may have a street project that's $20 million, but it actually occurs over 2 to 5 years, depending on what the projects are. So we budget for them, but when they actually occur, the actual expenses are more flatter when you see those come through. Service and supplies is your yellow bar on here, and salary and benefits is the blue bar on here. In the street fund, they're proposing $25 million of projects in the street fund. Neighborhood streets being the largest portion, almost $20 million. Preventative maintenance, traffic and engineering, street maintenance and an ops facility, and then the bridge preservation maintenance as well. And these all total to the $25 million that are being proposed at this point. When we look at room tax is actually a special revenue fund. It is split 50% between council and Parks and Recreation. Typically, we get around $3 million in total, so that would be split half to council, half to Parks and Recreation to be divvied out. The Parks and Recreation portion is in support of parks maintenance. The council portion is much more flexible. On the top right-hand side, you'll see some of the things that council has previously allocated to room tax. You have your Arts Commission in here. The Lear Theater is the medium-term obligation that we have for the Lear Theater. Keep Truckee Meadows Beautiful, Pioneer Center, Art and Public Places, and then some special event support. This is also where you'll see the new activation coordinator paid out of that council just recently approved. Room tax also, like C-tax, trends very similarly month after month, has its own kind of pattern to it. And you'll see the dotted line is the budget, which you can barely see in there because the lines kind of overlap so much. It really trends exactly the same every year. The big dip you see in that 1 year, that's that greenish color there, that is during the pandemic when the businesses were closed. So very little room tax was received during that time. But you can see that it has returned to its normal level and it's trending as it always has. It doesn't typically grow very much. It is pretty flat year over year. When you look at the sewer enterprise fund operates kind of like a business. So the costs of providing the service are financed or recovered by the users that pay for that service. So in this case, your sewer users and then your sewer connection fee users are in this. We have almost $97 million in total revenue. Most of that comes from charge for services at 86%, and then 11% from the sewer connection charges. On the right-hand side, where is that money spent? It's spent 20% in sewer reuse. Tumwharf's about 12%, engineering at 17%, and then some of the other areas are debt service, sewer and storm drain maintenance, storm drains, and the STED wastewater plant. You look at the history of the sewer fund. Going back to fiscal year 16 actuals, this gives you an idea of the expenditures. Capital outlay, obviously, just like the street fund, is the largest portion of it. And again, you get that skew on the right-hand side because we budget for it in a year, but it may take several years before a project is actually completed. The proposed CIP for the current year, or for next year, would be $116 million in projects, and those are the largest portion of it would be reuse at $38 million, sewer collection capacity projects, and then Tum Wharf, stormwater lift stations, Riz Wharf, and then maintenance and operations. The building enterprise is our other enterprise fund. So we have two. We have sewer, and then we have building. And so in the building enterprise fund, again, those services that we're providing are paying for the cost of providing that service. So again, this one's treated like a business. So there's about $12 million in total revenue. Charge for services is 99% of the total revenue in the building fund. 49% is for building permits, and then 13% for land use planning, and 11% in engineering. These are the divisions where the money is actually spent. When you look at the building fund history over time, you'll see it's mostly salary and benefits because we're providing that service of checking plans and doing the building inspections and doing all of those services that are associated with buildings. So salary and benefits is your largest piece on here. Internal service funds. These we treat similarly to a business. However, they're different in that the city funds these services and maintains them as self-supporting. So we have the fleet fund, the risk fund, the medical funds, and workers' compensation. So really, these are services that the city provides, and they're considered internal service funds. So fleet is funded through all of the other departments contributing into this fund. And we contribute enough to not only make this fund, but to make the reserves that we need going forward as well. And so you'll see capital is the largest amount in the fleet fund. Risk, it's service and supplies, and in medical and workers' comp, it's service and supplies, because those are either the insurance premiums or the premiums that are paid out, for example, like the claims in the medical funds or workers' compensation. This is one of the biggest things that I'm really proud of. I mean, we've come a long way since I even started here in 2016. You'll see fiscal year 10 where there's really not a lot going on there. We have some risk insurance, and I mean, we have the workers' compensation in the green, and then we had risk insurance prior to that, and then in 9 and 10, we didn't even have that. And so from that point forward, really looking at how we've grown this. So OPEB, again, that's our other post-employee benefits. Those are our retiree benefits that we are required to pay for those retirees. It's generally the medical benefits that they have when they retire. And so OPEB, when I got here, we were not funding it at all. You can see that OPEB, we started funding, that's in the blue, starting about 2015, and we have grown that up to $4 million a year, every year from last year, and we're projecting that going forward. And so that's in the 10-year model as far as built in there. The other thing is the workers' comp premiums. Look at how much we've really grown that to reduce that liability that we have outstanding out there. It's just really come a long way since I've been here, and I think council's direction in doing this has really led us into this new era. Now, I want to focus on the other post-employee benefit trust, because as I mentioned before, in 2016, we hadn't put any money away in that. And I know Council Member Reese has asked about this in the past. And the liability, it's based on an actuarial report and things. And right now, it's estimated at $160 million. And the actuarial report goes out based on how many employees we have retired and such. And the interesting thing about this is we are actually at a point, by continuing to fund this, we will actually reach the goal of funding to the 50 to 60% level within 10 years. What that does for the city is we're currently on a pay-go on those retiree medical benefits right now. So we're actually doing twice. We're on the pay-go for the ones that are retired right now. So that's anywhere between $5 to $6 million a year that we're paying. Plus, we're paying into this trust for $4 million a year to try to get it up to where it needs to be. Once this trust reaches 50 to 60% level, we will not be on the pay-go anymore. This trust will be able to sustain and continue to pay all those benefits out of it going forward. And that creates, it frees up your general fund, it frees up your other funds to do other things. But because this council has been so diligent in putting money toward this, there's actually an end goal in this. And it's within 10 years, we will be where we need to be with this. So really big deal.
Ms. Van Buren, sorry, can we pause for a minute? Because I think it is that big of a deal to just have a moment to think about it. I think it goes without saying that this has been a priority over those number of years. And from someone who has been on the other side of the city at times on this issue, it's a huge deal. But it's not so much that it's not only just the huge deal financially, but I'll say it's the commitment that you and the team are making to our employees, right? That they know that when they work here, that the benefits that they are bargaining for over their career will be paid to them when they leave, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's a commitment of trust that is more important than just the actual dollars. Yes, you're telling us something that is incredibly important about the way in which it's currently funded on a pay-go method, and we're about to be able to, in a few years, the worm turns, right? And that's true. I think the only entities here locally that are fully funded are Washoe County, and I think the North Lake Tahoe Fire Protection District, maybe the other entity that's fully funded. So to get to the point where we are with this, Yeah, that's a huge deal. I'd stand up and clap, but it might not be the appropriate moment to do it. But thank you for that. Thank you
Of
for
course.
taking the moment to
Washoe County
pause.
just recently switched over to using their trust.
Yeah, that's huge.
Mr. Reese, may I also comment on that,
Do
please?
you have something to add, Ms.
I
Breckus?
do,
Thank you
yeah,
so
because
much.
a lot of that was put into place during those very ugly years when you saw the fund balance down. So not only was that council at that time dealing with, frightening signs out there, but was also laying the groundwork to have this foundation of the OPEB. So it was, you all have done well, and this council's certainly done well in continuing, but we put a lot of financial parameters on in the 12, 13, 14, 15 fiscal years that are now starting to show. And so I just want to talk about how difficult that budgeting was in those years and how concerned I am to what downturns can do, but hopefully we'll be a more resilient organization if this does become a downturn, like we're seeing, and we would be expecting. Thank you.
Ms. Breckus, thank you for your commitment to the men and women of this organization, because without that foresight, we would not be where we are. So it's one of those legacy opportunities, and I think we're all always thinking about that. And as the longest serving member on this body, I think on the dais today, I think it is worth reflecting that we are where we are in the funding of the OPEB trust because you made that commitment to our employees.
Well, I don't take credit. It was really the professionals that were hired at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to continue on to this. This is the next really important slide, I think, that is important for the next things that we're going to talk about with Carrie and her team. This is our fleet and facility history. And so the green on here, that big green in the middle, is going to be your fleet funding. So how we funded fleet. And you'll see again in that 08 to 10 time period, that funding was decreased because it couldn't afford to do it during the recession. But what has happened since then is fleet has been funded much more steadily, and we continue to fund that. And then we also, if you see the pink is the fire apparatus funding that we're currently funding. And so we actually have a program now. We're moving that forward with a program, and they actually have funding to meet their needs based on their plans of their 5 and 10 years out. And so you'll see we've really grown that since 2020. We've grown that funding. There's also a tiny little piece on the bottom, if you see that tiny little yellow piece over there on 23 and 24, that's our fire maintenance facility funding. We started that, last year. We have $200,000 going in there. And then the really big take on this too is, we're doing some great things in fire apparatus and in fleet, but the areas that we really need to focus on next will be the facility maintenance, that flat blue line, and that flat light blue line, and parks maintenance. We haven't changed those over the years because we just haven't had the funding to go forward to do that. But that's knowing where we've been and knowing where we need to go. This is the important stuff of building the budget and knowing what's out there. And so we've started a little bit in fire maintenance, but we haven't done really what we need to in facilities or parks yet. So we need to build those going forward. And as a kind of a lead into what Carrie's going to talk about, Carrie and her team were working on a new look at CIP so we can really get an idea of what those needs are out there. And so that's what you'll see, Council, in your second binder. You notice you got 2 binders this year. The second one is something we're really proud of. It's to show you a look at all the facilities that the city has. And we called everything a facility and tried to get everything on there. So whether it's a parking lot, but those would be facilities, whether it's a building, whether it's a park, those items are listed in there. And then Carrie's going to go through with you what the process was on those. But that's our first look at everything that we would need to do and building that plan going forward. This obviously hasn't been completely vetted out yet, but this is the goal of us moving in that direction. And I think it's a fabulous first start at that, getting everything listed in one place so that we can really see that total picture of the city. And with that in mind, these are the recommendations from the Public Works staff as far as how that $5 million that we talked about earlier for maintenance would be going toward this new kind of plan. So we would have buildings and facilities at 3.7 million, parks at 700, parking lots at 400, and then fire stations at 200. And Carrie will kind of get into that a little more when she comes up here. I have one more slide and then we're on to Carrie. My last slide is just to give you a look at our debt. The blue are the total debt obligations, and the green are the general obligation debt. So the green is the smaller amount, which is general obligation. The remainder would be other obligations. And so you'll see we were at a high in 2009 with the retract, when those retract bonds were issued. And we went down to, in 2017, we were down, we refunded those retract bonds. So it increased a little bit in 18, but the restructuring of those bonds allows them to actually be paid off, because prior to that, we were paying so much in interest and other charges that we were never going to get to a point where we could pay them off. So that was the one really big step here. The next big step is we continued to pay off until we reached the point where we needed to issue more debt for the public safety center and the pool. And you'll see this cycle kind of going on in the debt. And this is typical for any agency, because normal agencies don't have $50 to $100 million on hand to fund really large, big projects. And so you will see that you use debt as an agency to fund your really large, big projects. And you can see that we are responsible with it because we take it out and then we pay it down and we take it out. So you see that cycle going on here. And with that, that ends my presentation of the entire budget itself. And I'm happy to answer other questions.
Yeah, so just so the team knows what we're going to do, we're going to take a moment to ask some questions here, Ms. Van Buren. Then we're going to break for about a half hour so everyone can get up, stretch, comfort break, and we'll everyone can eat, grab some lunch. Then when we come back, Ms. Koski will begin her presentation. So let's just start off by asking, are there questions of the body by anyone at this time on this second round of information? It looks like Ms. Taylor, you're in the queue first.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Thank you, Vicki, again. Thank you for all of this information. First question is, what exactly is a performance deposit fund?
It's when we have contractors or someone who have to perform something, whether it's grading or some other process that they're supposed to perform, we take a deposit. Once they perform that, we release it back to them. This used to be accounted for in just a trust fund. It wasn't considered in part of our funds, but the accounting, as far as the generally accepted accounting rules, changed on that a couple of years ago. So it becomes part of this process, but really we take a deposit for them to perform something that they need to do, and then we give it back.
Okay. My second question is to do with the maintenance and some of the funds that you got into. You were talking, let me see, I think it was slide number 31. There was some money in there for $500,000 for street maintenance and ops facility. Is that different than at the very beginning when we were talking about maintenance funds and operations?
This is specific to the street fund.
Specific, and the other one is overall general, sorry.
Correct.
Okay. And I think those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Breckus, you're up next.
Yeah, I guess I'll start at slide 30. I have my questions in order. So slide 30, the street fund, you're showing a decline from 23 to 24. What's the change in our expenditure? What's the difference on the 23 to 24? Why are we going down? Are we spending, did they come in with less capital?
It's a difference in the capital, and 23 again would be your estimate. So we may have projects that have been out there for 2 or 3 years, but they're completing them in this current year, so it would be a little bit higher. So you see your capital outlay is 33 million estimated for this current year, and it's probably because they're estimating a lot of those projects being completed in this current year, but they may have started 2-3 years
Yeah,
ago.
I mean, the Watt Street project is really the first year I've ever seen a project go over 2 construction seasons, so that could be, it'd be good, you know, I don't know how we're not, don't seem to be taking notes or questions, but, you know, these are like questions that, in my view, you know, backup maybe, you know, for things that, you know, why, you know, I don't know, or so on. Now, it's been a long time since I thought about this, but the street fund override, it does not expire, correct? Is that correct?
It does expire.
What is the year that the street fund override expires? Because that is a very important thing.
Is it 33?
33, and then that's a vote of the public, not a vote of the council. Yes, okay. Now, excuse me, slide 34, I was in my.
I'm sorry, it was 38.
38,
Yes.
okay. So that'll be showing on projection, on 10-year projections, very, you know, not that far off. Okay, slide 34. I noted this in my review last year, and I didn't, of last year's materials. I didn't notice it this year. What are we calling sewer reuse? Because I don't know what sewer reuse is. I know what a collection system is. I know what thing is. What is the definition of sewer reuse?
Sewer reuse is utility services, and I believe that is stormwater, correct? Oh, American Flat. Okay. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
so let's, you know, we're calling other geographic things, certain things like Tumworth or so on. I mean, I call American Flats Stimworth because it's the effluent for Stimworth. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but, you know, sewer reuse to me does not apply geographic, so that that language is hard for me. Slide 37. What is the current balance in the building enterprise fund? I've been off the BFAC liaison for a long time, but that's always been an issue. 38. I'm sorry, is it 38? What's the current? Yeah, because we're doing a capital outlay this year of 4 million for building the building history, which is quite a nut. What is that 4 million going for?
So it's page 37, I think, for them.
No, right here, building
Right
fund
here,
history.
she's on here.
38.
This is just an anticipated, this is something that's being discussed about restructuring the second floor remodel. This is just an estimate at this point of something that potentially will be coming back to council.
Okay, I would like to know for our next convening or an interim memo, and a lot of my requests at the council for future information have not been met, and, you know, I'm disappointed in that, but I think it's I'm not asking stuff that I don't think is relevant, and I think this is relevant. What is our balance in the building enterprise fund?
Estimated for the current year would be $16.8 million.
Okay,
And estimated ending for next year would be 12.3.
so that's why you're planning on, see, that's material. $4 million capital out of the building enterprise to remodel a floor. That, you know, and I know the enterprise fund, for some legal reasons, has always had issues of what you're running balance. So I think it's not something to gloss over. I guess my time is over for this first round, and I appreciate that, but I would like to know more about that, because it's something that the body needs to keep an eye on.
Okay, Ms. Dewar, you're
Sure,
up next.
thank you. Can we go back to slide 40? I didn't want to take time at that time, but I did want to say, we very much, the OPEB obligation expense, I know I spent a lot of time with our CFO at the time trying to talk about this issue and get these things funded, and I too was extremely pleased that the very next fiscal year, we started on the OPEB. And it was a huge liability, and I love the fact in 10 years, the trust will be able to earn enough interest that it'll be able to pay these liabilities without us having to budget every time, right? So that's amazing. I just wanted to add my kudos to that. You know, it's ongoing, 8 years in the making so far. Page 41, I think I had, sorry, moving on to page 42. This I thought was a very interesting chart, and I thought your points were well taken. So I want to make sure I understand this. You've been talking in terms of actuals versus budget. So for both parks facility maintenance and facility maintenance, it looks like they've spent the whole budget. They've been given a certain amount to spend, and they spent it all. Is that what we're to take away here?
Pretty much because that's all they've had.
Right.
is That
Like
small amount every year, the same
couple
amount.
100,000, it looks like,
It's 400,000
Yeah.
each.
right? Okay, so but we're not gonna start raising that now. So when are we thinking about addressing it?
We're thinking about addressing it with this new look at the capital in total. So when you look at this next look at it, we would be putting parks at 700 instead of 400. And then building and facilities would go to 3.7. So
From 400?
from the 400, but it would be dedicated in a little different way. We're taking a different lens to look at this, and this is part of what Ms. Kosky will come up and kind of describe, because this is what we're proposing as the new look forward on how we can get a handle on this and move forward and get this in the right direction too.
So the reason I'm highlighting, I mean, it's important for folks here to understand where we've been, but where we're going. And it didn't exactly show in this chart, you know, this bump up in FY24. I didn't see anything going up in that line, but in the numbers you just showed, it's very important to know we're going from 400,000 a year to 700,000 for parks, and 400 to 3.7. If you can move the chart there to the one that she showed, which
This
is
one?
page 43. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the next one.
This one.
Yeah. So what you're saying is going from 400,000, that's like a 10 times increase almost
Well,
for building and facilities.
Typically, we've done a little bit of that maintenance every year, and then we've set aside money for capital. This would put everything into one pot, the maintenance and the capital money into this one bucket, so that we can analyze based on the new information that Carrie's going to show you how we're going to look at it going forward.
So it's not just maintenance, it's maintenance and capital, new
Correct.
capital expenditures.
Well, not new capital. This would just be maintenance.
Okay. All right. And then I have one more question. I can
Go
wait
ahead,
for
Ms.
round
Stewart.
two.
No, you're
Okay.
up.
Going to page 44 on debt. This is something I focus on tremendous amount. Because we did reach that high, one thing that doesn't show here, I think, the debt for 2009, as I recall, it was actually 900,000, but maybe that's like including this debt and some other debt, or is this the total debt?
This is the total debt.
Okay, so we reached a high of 650,000, a million, excuse me. And then we reached a low in 2016. And when we're reaching a new low, you're projecting in 2027,
Yes, as we
assuming we
continue to
don't
pay
add
off.
any more debt.
Correct.
Are you comfortable, basically what this would show is always carrying about 500,000, 400,000 in debt? Is that like a reasonable amount for our organization?
Absolutely. This is
Right?
very sustainable. Yes.
Yeah, I just think that's worth noting. And just for our newer colleagues, we spent, as you can see, these years, all we had done, we couldn't add more fire equipment. We could not build a pool. We could not do anything. We were so, I guess, chained, I will say, with the retract debt. All we did was pay, and to your point, we could really only pay the interest on that because the interest rates were so high. We could just barely keep up, and we would never be paying off the principal. But by this refunding in 2018, that changed. That was a huge game changer to me, because now we could actually start paying our principal. And were we allowed, I think we could not prepay our principal for something like 10 years.
Typically, it's 10 years.
And then we could start prepaying our principal, so we could reduce the interest
Yes.
based on how high the interest rate is, if we were even interested in doing that.
Typically, they're
But
not.
what did you get this down to in terms of interest?
On this one, I'm not sure.
Well, I'm pretty sure it
but-
was from like 8, 9 down to like 4,
I believe
5.
so. And typically, you can't do anything with bonds within the first 10 years because they're
Right.
not callable for 10 years
Right.
typically.
So I mean, people should know this is just a little bar on a chart, but it was I think, seminal change, a critical change to our entire finance picture when we did that. So anyway, and it allows us to do the pool, the fire station, the police station,
And this also includes your sewer projects as well. This is all debt.
all debt. Okay. All right, I'll stop for now. Thanks.
Okay, Ms. Van Buren, for my part, I want to focus on slide 43. This is certainly illustrative and important, And I'm coming at it from a little bit different perspective, I think, and we'll see where we get to with Ms. Koski. But I want to focus on the fire stations. This is a $200,000 line item. That's tragically underfunded, right? And I think everyone would acknowledge that. I think I spent some time in Station 3 in the last couple of weeks and went into the crew quarters, and it was just depressing, quite frankly. It was dark. The closet doors were falling off of the closets. I understand that there's been a lot of overlooked maintenance for a long time. And I know we're going to be talking about that in the afternoon session, and we'll perhaps pick up there. But and now we'll go to the next slide that Ms. Stewart was looking at. I'm looking at an 04 to 2027 range, and there certainly has been an enormous effort to pay down debt. Obviously, we've made some encumbrances too with the investment in the public safety center and the pool. One of the things I think is incumbent upon all of us to think about, and I'll challenge my colleagues in the afternoon session to think about, is for more than 30 years, I don't think we've had a very good way to look at our capital needs. We have built, but we have not maintained in our parks, in our buildings and facilities. So for 30 years, prior councils have not made a priority to address those issues. And now it's kind of like the chickens are coming home to roost, right? So I think we will have to make some historic investments in this community because, as I understand it from having looked at the materials, we're talking about somewhere on the magnitude of $200 million in deferred maintenance on our facilities. I mean, those are our buildings, the things we own, and I just don't think that's sustainable. We've got to find a way, not just with $4 million a year or $10 million a year on some kind of pay-go, model, but we really have to think strategically about what do we want to do with our own assets. And it matters to our people, it matters to our public who use the facilities. And so as we look into the afternoon, and I guess it's somewhat my attempt to foreshadow my thoughts on it, but we've got to be better. We've got to do better. I think you are someone who is particularly adept at helping us chart a path. I think about the $10 million that you've already sort of earmarked for the central station. I mean, that's incredible. Let us take up the mantle of leadership and find a way forward to improve our capital needs so that we're not talking about a $200,000 line item for, I don't even know what you'd do with $200,000 for most of our fire stations. It would be like painting, a coat of paint on something. And so we'll have to get there. But again, I'm not discouraged. I'm actually encouraged because for the first time, you are providing a path and a way for us to evaluate those things critically. And I think that's important for our colleagues as we move forward to figure out that path together. Are there any other folks in the queue? Because my speaker deck does not show it. Okay, Ms. Breckus.
Yeah, I'll start. Thank you. I'll start with this one. This 23 out to 27, does it involve a restructuring of any current debt? Refinance of any existing bonds?
No, this as it currently exists.
And does it involve the capital expenses for RISWER, the American Flat project?
That is not on here at this time. There have been some conversations on whether that will be cash or that will a bond be needed for that, and so we're kind of looking at that.
We need to get a handle on that real soon because the $65 million to expand RISWER is stranded until we get there, and I think we need to get there real soon. I'll just leave it at that. Can you go to slide 42, please? So in other words, it's not all rosy because otherwise you're going to take a stranded asset of $65 million for RISWER if you don't. So, it's.
This does include the $55 million.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because we already built that and we
Correct.
owe people money on that. Slide 42, please. That yellow one, the fire facility maintenance, what's the funding source on that? Did I see that was coming out of room tax?
General fund.
Oh, it is general fund? Okay. And then slide 39, please. I'm having a hard time understanding why risk fund has $1 million of salaries. That's 5-6 people. What's going on there? How are you slicing and dicing those salaries out?
Risk fund, and all of these funds receive a cost allocation, and it's based on the total city cost allocation plan that we do each year. So, for example, in finance, we spend time working on putting this project together, working on the books for risk. HR spends time on it, and so that plan takes a proportionate share of all those salaries and charges it appropriately to these funds based on how we spend our time.
Yeah, okay, I get that, but the more signs of, playing games, dealing with, concerns about the future are a lot of cost allocations. That's like the first sign that I've seen in my life of cost allocating. The city manager's got 10 funding sources in his salary or so on. And I've seen it. It happened here. So I keep an eye on those. That's good. Now, slide 44, did we already do that one? Yeah, I think we did that one. Slide 40. You spent quite a bit of time talking about work comp premiums and how we're paying on those, but those also include our payouts.
Correct. Yes.
So that's an area of growth of concern to me. I'm seeing through the accounts payable, which don't go on our agenda any longer. I voted against that. A lot of worker comp payouts. I've asked for those. I've asked for other severance agreements. I was getting some, but now I'm told, they're personnel files. But I think we need to have transparency about how much payout is going on work comp, because those are above and beyond premiums. And I'm seeing big jumps on these. And I think, from my analysis, there were at least 8 severance payouts from May to now of this year. Some may have been workers' comp, some may not have been, but we need to get a handle on that. And so that sign to me, that growth is not as encouraging as I would say. And then I have one more comment when we go around. Thank you.
Ms. Burkus? Oh, it looks like Ms. Ebert is ready.
Yeah, I did have a question. It was on slide, oh, bear with me. Slide 35. I noticed on salary and benefits, from 2017 to 2023, the estimate, there's been a very significant increase. I just would like to know what those estimates, what the increase has been over the years. I know we've had a lot of different things happening with the sewer fund, so if I can just kind of get a high level, what these staff are, what the salary and benefits are for.
Sure, I'm happy to provide you more detail, but just in general, over on this, as we adopt the budget each year, generally the sewer fund does get more positions based on the amount of need and the services that they're providing. So that would just be your increase in staff over time.
Okay, do we have a number on how much?
I do not, but I could get that for you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ms. Dewey, did you have a question?
Thanks. So on slide 34, so this is the room tax, I'm sorry, wrong slide here. Sorry. Let's go to slide 33. So on slide 33, we're in the dark purple. So we look like we're tracking along where we have been tracking.
Yes.
Okay, so that's good news. So our expectation might be that it would go up. I mean, in FY20, it went down severely. It was tracking, and then suddenly we had a downturn. What are you projecting? What are you feeling?
It's going to stay pretty flat, Councilmember
But do you think
Dewar.
it'll land where 18, 19?
It's always going to be around $3 million
22? Okay.
Because it's based on room nights in a certain area.
Right.
And so it's 1% of that. So even though room nights have been down historically year over year, the rate charged for the room has increased. So it's stayed pretty flat.
gotcha.
That's what keeps it so flat.
And so the one before it, 32, that's one of the uses of room tax, if I got this right.
Correct.
We have some of the uses here, and I wasn't really sure. So on arts, parks, and historic resources, does that that includes the activation coordinator that we just approved?
Yes.
Okay, and then where it says in blue, expenses by council priority, I wasn't really sure what that was.
That would be This is all council's priority as far as the half portion. So we have a total of 3.2 million that comes in here. Half goes to parks maintenance and half would go to council. So approximately 1.6 million is at council's discretion.
Gotcha.
Listed on here are things that council has chosen in the past, just for your reference. And then obviously you can give us direction if you want to see some of that change.
Okay, well, I think it's good for the newer members to understand, we do have discretion. This isn't earmarked for so much for parks, so much for art, so much for premiums, downtown lighting, whatever. We have
Correct.
choices. We may not want to change that previous allocation very much, but it is a choice of ours and we're not sort of locked in.
Correct.
And then one more question was about the sewer fund. I gotta make sure I got the right page here. It was where we were showing, let me find this. Maybe it was slide 34, where we showed a certain amount to storm drains. I actually think it was a different chart. But anyway, it showed, I think, about $9 million going to stormwater, as I recall, and I don't recall which chart it was on. And I wondered if that $9 million, I'm gonna assume, there you go. There it is, 9.5 million. I'm gonna assume that if we adopt a stormwater fee sometime next year, that $9 million would be moved over or continue to be funded, or is the anticipation that $9 million would go to sewer? That's my question.
Right now, stormwater is part of sewer. And
Right.
if you were to adopt that, yes, this would transition over to that new
Okay,
enterprise.
okay, is that everybody's understanding? That's very good. Thank you.
Ms. Breckes?
Yeah, back to that workman's comp, I want to emphasize, I do think it's appropriate oversight of the council to understand in the workman's comp premiums, how much are, and I don't even know how to say it, judgments or obligations to employees for separation, and are they ongoing? That should be sliced down. Likewise, in the risk, if these severance payouts, when someone is separated, whether they're let go against their will or usually against their will, and they sign these agreements. An agreement is only needed if they're getting something above and beyond what would be normal employee separation. And the council should keep an eye on that because people have seemed to just disappear out of the ether. And I'm concerned about the workman's comps. I think if they're not all premiums, they should be disclosed of what line is being, and are we absorbing more payouts than just premiums. And I've seen that before when we've done actuarials, it goes back, but it should be a real-time oversight of the council. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the Building Enterprise Fund, which I think was said to be, didn't show on the slide, I asked about it, carrying a $16.8 million surplus proposed to involve a $4 million capital outlay of the second floor. The city is under no obligation to have a building enterprise fund. I've said this years, I've maybe skipped a couple budget cycles. We could take the costs long-term out, put those out there, park that, and roll that money into the general fund. So think about that when things get tight in the general fund next time. This is the go-to tack. It's never been able to happen to that because the development community, our stakeholders, feel they have a lockbox on it, and they do to some way, but there's a workaround. And I'll just let you know, where's the fiscal equity in the home-based Gallo Cleans Houses, gets a license to operate in the city of Reno. That goes into the general fund to pay for police, fire, and parks. But me, when I pull a permit, and a lot of these permits are pulled by people like me to get a new water heater, why is that going to the lockbox to remodel the second floor? Okay? So the general fund, when it gets hungry, when it gets real tight, look to the Building Enterprise Fund where you're sitting on a $60 million balance and you have to come up with remodeling every floor, because at some point you're going to run out of floors to remodel in this building with that money. Thank you.
At this time, we're going to be in recess until.
Excuse me, Vice Chair.
Yes.
I just have one quick thing I wanted to say on this slide. This is not actually workers' comp premiums here. These are the amounts that we are contributing toward workers' comp.
For
So
our
this is how
self-funding
we've
or-
grown for our self-funding. So these are called premiums because these are revenues coming into the workers' comp fund. The same with the OPEB obligation expense. It's not the expense, we're expensing it in that we are setting it aside for the OPEB, and then the same thing for risk as well. And so we've actually grown our workers' comp fund significantly over the last few years as well.
Have you run an actuarial on that so we can see how much you're paying out?
We do have actuarials that we do annually, yes.
Are those given to the council?
I believe, I'm gonna have to look too.
In the past,
They are in the ACFR,
in full scope?
the information,
Well,
yes.
we've
correct.
seen them at the FAB. I mean,
Correct,
And
yes.
so I understand where they are, but I appreciate that they are in the ACFR, so that's great.
But I just wanted to clarify this slide.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Sorry.
Incredible presentation this morning. Let's take
Thank
a
you.
break until 1 o'clock. That gives everyone the chance to stretch and do what they've got to do. We're in recess. Madam Clerk? Madam Clerk? Madam Clerk? No?
Vice Mayor Reese, if you are ready to reconvene, we can call the meeting back to order.
We are called back to order, and I think Ms. Koski, you're up to bat.
And
What shoes are you wearing today? Do we have this?
Not wearing this.
Oh, darn it. Where are my sparkly shoes? Okay, welcome, Ms. Koski.
Thank you. Did you want me to go? Okay. So, good afternoon, Mr. Vice Mayor and City Council members. For the record, Carrie Koski, Director of Public Works, your city engineer. So today I am here to talk to you about the capital improvement plan, which includes an improved process for identifying and ranking the maintenance needs of the city assets that we are responsible for maintaining, and what we need to focus on now to manage our assets so they create value. So our capital improvement plan is basically a blueprint for the sustaining and improving of the community's infrastructure. The plan includes 4 major elements, and those are big picture thinking, community goals. Third element is facility data and prioritization, and of course funding sources is what we just heard Director Van Buren talk about earlier this morning. So in our capital improvement plan, this council has taken an intentional approach as the community grows, and they have focused on the 6 goals of our strategic plan. In essence, these 6 goals of our strategic plan are the foundation for the capital improvement program. There's a quote by Alice Walton that I love that applies here, and it goes something like this: "One of the great responsibilities I have is to manage my assets wisely so they create value." So now I'm really excited to talk to you about this new process. It's an improved process for our capital improvement program. So staff has looked at facilities, as Vicki described earlier, facilities that would be funded from the general fund. So we're not talking about street fund facilities, we're not talking about sewer fund facilities, we're talking about facilities that would be funded out of the general fund. And basically we focus on 2 major categories. And at the top we've got capital improvement shown in yellow, and capital maintenance. So when Vicki was talking to us earlier this morning, she was talking about, when she talked about all the things that we have done, Moana Pool, the large facilities, the Public Safety Center, those are in the capital improvement bucket. In the capital maintenance program, when she talked in that slide about the $5 million to capital maintenance, that was these categories. So there's 4 subcategories under capital maintenance: city buildings, parks, parking lots, and other assets. And other assets are things that don't fit into the other 3 categories, but still are just as important, like public art, Reno Arch, parking meters, downtown lighting. So I'm going to talk right now about the capital improvements, the yellow side of the slide here. So over the past few years, due to the council's fiscal responsibility and our amazing finance team, we've been doing very well in this category. So facilities that have been funded and are under construction are listed here: the Public Safety Center, Moana Springs Community Aquatics and Fitness Center. We started the City Hall seismic retrofit, and then the Neil Road facility was recently funded by ARPA funding. And we will be bringing back something to council for construction on that, design and construction. The fiscal year 24 priorities, the ones that we have identified, the council has already looked at as major priorities, are the fire station, central station, and City Hall remodel. I wanted to just mention that the City Hall remodel is, the second floor. We talked about that, or Vicki talked about that a little earlier. It will provide better service delivery to the public and better space needs for the rest of the staff to better serve our community. So I'm going to go back to this slide. So now I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about capital maintenance. So our capital maintenance needs are about $182 million. We have looked at it in categories. In the building and facility category, it's about 43%, about $77 million. Parks is about 38%. Parking lots are 12%, and then that other category is about 7%. So what is this $182 million? What are the needs for? Basically, this is for maintenance and repair, just to keep our facilities in good operating condition. Many of our buildings are over 40 years old. Many of them need just basic things like paint, flooring, fixture replacements, landscaping repairs. Then there's other maintenance needs that are needed, such as structural repairs, heating, ventilation, bring things to new building codes, and bring things up to ADA accessibility. So I would like to just shout out right now to Trish Sebastian. She's sitting behind me. She's our Administrative Services Manager in Public Works. She did a fantastic job of putting together the binder that we have for all to look at. In this binder, it's the 2023-24 Facility Condition Assessment Report. We have sections in here for all of those categories. I would like to just make mention that in the very beginning, we did separate out public art, but public art is considered to be under the other asset category, and it is included in those totals. So capital maintenance for city-owned buildings. Here again, we're talking about the blue icons, I guess, on that slide. We have 51 total city facilities in high use, 4 pools, and those are about $77 million. I want to give some credit here, major credit, to Director Truehill and maintenance and operations staff. They have done a fantastic job of putting together the needs for the buildings and facilities that are listed in the book here in our binder. What we have done is we've ranked our facilities based on the current maintenance needs compared to the replacement value. And I'll talk about that in more detail. So of our facilities, we have the ranking ranks from good to critical. And basically, the higher the number, the more deferred maintenance that we have. One of the things that Vicki and I have been talking about, Director Van Buren and I have been talking about, is the refinements that we need to this program. This is going to be our baseline. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to bring all of our data into one place. We all have our own departments and we all do a really good job of keeping track of what we need to keep track of, but we all need it all in one place. And we need it all in one place so we can take a deeper dive and look into, what are the facility costs? Do we need to upgrade those costs? We would like to add the operational cost. They're not in the binder right now, but I think it would be very important to have those operational costs included in these facility sheets so we could look at, they could help us drive those decisions on maybe it makes sense to look at sustainability measures for some of our facilities. It'd be just easier for us to make those decisions and bring them to council. The other thing I'd like to talk about is we pulled out all of the terms, all of the agreements that we have for some of our facilities. Some of our facilities we own and we maintain. Other facilities we don't own, but we still are responsible for maintaining them. So we pulled out all of those agreements. They're all in one place. We'd recommend that we're going to take a deeper dive and look at all of those to evaluate the terms of those agreements. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about that facility condition index for our buildings. So in the binder, I just clipped out a sheet and we could just kind of talk through this so you can see what kind of work has gone into this too. I want to say Frank Avera and his group have done a fantastic job of outlining each one of the facilities. This one here happens to be fire station number 5. And there was a glitch in the copying, and the PDF is all scrunched up in some of these numbers. So I'm showing them on the screen here so you can kind of walk through it with me. The fire station number 5 is the fire station on Mayberry Drive. It's 63 years old. What Frank has done and his team is they've put together what the priority projects should be what the estimated cost should be for priority 1, which is basically immediate type of an immediate needs. Then he separated out the priority 2, which would be something that we would want to look at for the following year. And then priority 3 would be something within maybe 5 years. So what we are looking at here is the facility condition index is the estimated of all the costs, so that $560,000 divided by your replacement cost. Now, the replacement cost is shown down there as like $1.3 million. And we use this RS Means construction estimator to get the majority of those costs. We were having some difficulty getting some real costs because there's a lot of different factors. So that's one of the things that we'd like to take a deeper dive in and make sure that those are in alignment. So when you divide those two out, you get about 43%. So what does that mean? That means we should be looking at a replacement plan for this facility. It doesn't mean that this facility is unsafe. It doesn't mean that, but it means this is the time that we need to start looking at these things for replacement. Okay, I'm going to go to parks. So in the parks, we have 87 parks facilities. 14 of those are community parks that are in poor condition, 52 neighborhood parks. Over half of those are in critical or poor condition, and then 16 pocket parks. In the center there, I listed out, we've got 3 community buildings, 2 recreation centers, and of course the arts and culture building. Those are not listed under parks, those are under buildings. They would be considered facilities. So the parks would be $70 million in capital maintenance needs. Here I want to shout out to Director Uliot, hope I didn't mess that up, Uliot, on maintenance operations, but led by Matt Berzina. Matt is the subject matter expert in all things parks, and he's done a great job. He has gone through and done condition assessment, and that's basically what's laid out in the binder. We've gone from good, fair, poor to critical, and those are the 4 categories. In the meantime, since we put this together, Director Uliot and I have talked, and we'd like to refine this. We think that's a little too complicated. We'd like to look at maybe a 3 rating system on this. We'd like to look at what is critical, what is we need to address for emergencies, remedies for dangerous conditions, or regulatory compliance. And then the second would be something that's ongoing, routine maintenance. Then the third category would be like important maintenance that would come out of something like the PROS plan. So it's important that our master plans that we are in process of right now, like the Parks and Recreation Open Space Master Plan, it's important that that information gets included into the condition assessments and into the plan for capital improvements. Once again, this is a baseline. We really want to take a deeper dive. We wanted to add the utility costs or the operational costs for each one of the parks. We want to add the previous capital maintenance onto those sheets so we can evaluate and make better data-driven decisions. The next category is actually falls under Public Works, under Katie Harrison and Hans Meyer's team. They are the subject matter experts here. They have identified we've got 73 parking lots within that are facilities, and you might be asking yourself, well, the parking lots, why doesn't they fall under street fund? And the answer is simple: they're not streets, they're parking lots. So they're not eligible for street fund. They need to be funded by another funding source. 19% of those parking lots are in the failed condition. That's 14 parking lots in our database are failed. That equates to about $22 million in capital maintenance needs. The way we listed these is basically we use the same sort of prioritization that we use in our street program. We use the pavement condition index. So 0 means the picture that says failed, and the 100 is like an excellent or a good. So most of those parking lots are fall under those categories that are shown in that pie chart there. So we've got 19% in failed, excellent to 14%. Excellent to good is on the right-hand side. When you get into the fair condition, that's when we want to start to do patching, concrete repairs, and that sort of thing. When we get into the poor and failed, typically you're just throwing good money after bad, right? We're just throwing money away if we do anything. So we really want to keep things into a place where they're in that fair, good, excellent condition. Now for the last category, which is that other assets. So other assets are, like I said, they're very important to us as well. We just wanted to have the minimal amount of categories, and that comes out to be about $12 million. So I mentioned public art. I want to give a shout out to Megan Berner. She has provided, her and her team are the subject matter experts on all things art, and they have done a fabulous job by going through here and making a list of all of the art that the city owns. She's put together replacement cost, annual maintenance needs, and major maintenance. So you're probably thinking, what is annual maintenance on art? Well, art needs cleaning. There are certain things that we have to do to art if it's in our inventory to take care of it. So it provides value. Major maintenance would be something like repainting of a mural. Once again, that is our baseline in the binder. So that brings me to what can we do about funding this $182 million? Well, Vicki provided a really good solution here today, a good start. And I wanted to also give a shout out to Director Wilsey in Policy and Strategy and Director Van Buren. They both have put together a program where we are now aggressively, and I say aggressively, going after grants. And those types of grants that we're going after, we've had the ARPA funding come to us. We've got a lot of money going to parks. We even got some going to placemaking. So we are making a difference in that respect. We have gotten FEMA funding through the Department of Homeland Security, EPA funding, green infrastructure. The list goes on and on. One more thing that we can do, so I'm going to kind of wrap this up by talking about the fee schedule. Matt Taylor is going to talk about the fee schedule in detail, but I just wanted to make a plug here also that the fee schedule is our opportunity to make sure that we are charging appropriate fees so we don't have to make large corrections in the future. So with that, that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, Ms. Koski, excellent presentation as always. Let me first turn over to see if anyone has raised their hand in the queue. Ms. Koski, I suppose I'll start by asking just the depth of the $183 million. It seems very challenging. And I think when I picked up my board books over the weekend and started to dig into them, it was sort of the first mental block I came to is I looked at the depth of which we have not funded appropriately our ongoing maintenance and capital improvement needs over the last, we'll just pick 30 years, I don't know, might be more than that, but it seems like a lot of kicking the can down the road has occurred in this city for a long time. And so rather than focus on the negative, which is something I cannot change, I'm sort of thinking about the positive. So the first thing is that the presentation itself is a positive because it gives us a target, right? What do they say? Failing to plan is planning to fail,
Yes.
right? So we now have the opportunity as a body to have a significant amount of input on how we change course, right? Perhaps past councils were dealing with other kinds of issues, whether it was retrack or an economic decline that happened, from, we'll say, 07 to 12. I mean, we have also gone through a pandemic, right? So for my part, I think about it as a great roadmap. It's instructional to me. And for what I would like to see us do is figure out how we're going to start taking down these needs, right? Because I do think if we look at the things that you're prioritizing, it's our people, right? It's the facilities where they sleep if you're a firefighter, right? It's our parks where we recreate. It's the, buildings where our road and maintenance crews have their shops and where they work out of and where they do the things. So all those things to me are a very positive sign. What my hope is that the discussion we'll have both today and sort of ongoing is how to start taking bites of the elephant, right? And how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. So let's figure it out together. I think there's a lot here to be really excited about, rather than my initial reaction was pretty downer, right? And so I'll just sort of say that as my opening salvo, and then we'll turn to my colleagues to see what comments they have. It looks like Ms. Taylor, you're up first in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Thank you, Carrie, for this. Is this reporting, is this new? All of the facility index and all of, because it's very impressive. There's a lot of data here, so thank you.
Yes,
For all of you that were out there doing that. That's a lot of work.
it's a lot of work, yes.
My question, I have two questions. The first one is the facility condition index number, that 42.96%. Where is the number where you say, okay, we need to be go or no go? What is the threshold for that?
We're getting close there. We're getting close.
So if it's like 30%, are we okay?
30%, we should be looking at a facility replacement plan at 30%. And it really should be in our capital improvement plan for each facility. Either we're going to replace it or, there's some historical buildings, we're not going to replace those, right?
Okay.
So we should be keeping a real close look on that, close tabs on that, yes, at 30%. But it should be in the plan. And that was one of the refinements that I was talking about is we basically took all of the resources we had just to get everything put together, and now we really want to refine that and get something that we can track our progress.
My next comment is more about what Vice Mayor said, and to me, it looks like we have $177 million of unfunded capital improvement projects because we have 182 and we have 5 million. One of my overall comments, I think, for this whole session, or for what I'm hearing right now, is we've got to come up with a plan to fund that $177 million. And as much as I appreciate grants and other work, I don't think we're going to get there with that. So those are probably going to be some very tough conversations.
Yep.
And I'm going to look to all of the experts out there to come up with some fantastic ideas of how we can do that. So thank you very much. And thank you again for all of the work that went into this. It's very helpful.
Thank you, Ms. Breckus. You're up.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Good job on getting to this point. I just want to put out a few concepts. There could be concern that you're getting maybe a little too engineering and operational on this without tying it to the larger policy values. And we've talked, I think, about the deficiencies of those broad encompassing goals. And I've done capital improvement plans, for a city, and been the lead person on it. And I think what you need to do is have a policy statement for your organization's CIP. Is it maintenance before new facilities? Is it corresponding to the rating system? Is it equity? 4 or 5 values specific to the CIP. I think the operational costs are informative, but I don't think they should live within a CIP when it translates to budget dollars. Just like you got the bridge scouring line item, which I take responsibility for, because when I came on, I wanted to see all the inspections for the Keystone Avenue Bridge, and the Keystone Avenue Bridge was not being scoured. And that is not good. So I think operational has to live somewhere else. I think that just like the department heads got to ask for, there's 40 people for PD or so on, other aspirational projects need to come in. I'd like to put on this year, because it lives in my inbox, the Plum Lane overpass. That is an NDOT study, which is the way to solve the problem, which was a young woman getting run over and killed going to that high school across, a very challenging area because it's right near a freeway interstate. And so those sort of aspirational things need to go in. 5 miles of collective system for sewer in, the Island 18. Those things need to go in. Recently, I voted in part against a new project up in the North Valleys because I don't see any parks going in up there. So I think these things need to live in there. So they're a statement of, at that one time, desires of where we want to go. I do think you need a rating level. I'd go essential, critical, and supporting, something like that. One that if it goes down, government operations cease. Critical is, it's important. Supporting, you may allow it to fold. For all intensive purposes, the Southside School, which was a jewel, a lot of grant money went into that. It wasn't supporting in any way because we leased it for 40 years to UNR, so it's off the books. I think that one thing that is I see in the document, but I don't see explained in the concept, is studies should be in there, whether or not they're the first year in a multi-year project or they just are standalone. I think Ms. Berner and the Arts Group Commission wants an update to the arts master plan. I think that can stand as a capital improvement item as itself, but operational should not. And I think you have that for the Lear. You have a design project. We call it 501 Riverside Drive now, but you have that as a multi-year, and the first is a use analysis, more or less a plan. So I would not cease from plans. And while I appreciate the parking lot concepts, parking lots are being reimagined all over this world. And so the engineering approach I'm a little concerned of is you've got rating for all the parking lots and then you're just trying to redo parking lots versus taking a step back, saying the parking lot is in some sort of context, a place that maybe you need a plan to design that place. It's not lost on me that the one parking lot we had that a lot of my Ward 1 constituents want is now Mr. Jacobs's private parking lot. So it just kind of ad hoc was given to someone who walked in the door. But I think there's opportunities in a better way to serve public needs for parking lots, like the Tiglia parking lot. Your engineering study may say it's in fail, but it may be over appropriated land use to that use on that park, and we'll know that when we do that park study. So those are some comments. Oh, if I may, I'll wait to go around because I do have one more comment.
Ms. Burkus, just go ahead.
Okay, the last one, and this is, I know where we're going, where we've been, because when I came on in 2012, I was lobbied by like 2 or 3 teams of people responding to an RFP to do a lease back for a police station. And I'm like, it's not even on the CIP. I'm not talking to anyone who wants to do any business with the city about a capital project that's not on the CIP. That's just not how I'm going to operate. Finally, it did get on the CIP, but how that went is another story. But the next go-to for this organization has to be having a street and road network CIP that is our own. We have all these joint agencies, sister agencies, but the streets is the first one we need to tackle, unlike Tamwa, where they maintain the whole system all the way up. We know that the street system has a big function in this body from accepting streets and then operations and maintenance. So this body needs to set their own street and highway priorities and hand those off to RTC. That's how you cure, in my view, a part of the broken RTC process that is not serving our community well. And I think that that's the next go, is to have a true inventory of our street network and our deficiencies there beyond the engineering approach that we've been doing of a PCI.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Burkus. Ms. Koski, I think I'll just interject before I go to Ms. Dewar. Obviously, you are an engineer by background, correct?
Yes.
So you have an engineering approach to how you presented it. Some people are planners by background,
Yes.
so they're very plan-focused.
Yes.
I'm a lawyer, so I try to focus on those things. So we all bring something to the discussion, and ultimately, I want to say, again, I appreciate the way that you've broken it down because it allows us to now chart the course for the future. Some of the things will be distractions. Some of the things will be, sort of that ward by ward approach to what particularized project a person wants to see. But you've got a plan now, and this is a really great working document. And I assume over the course of the next 5-10 years, it'll be refined and as happens. And so, take it in stride that all of these things are part of a greater plan and vision casting. You got to have a vision to do it before you can start to execute on that vision. And I think that's an invitation to all of us to participate in that way. I'll turn it over now to Ms. Dewar.
Yeah, thank you. Great job, Carrie. I just want to kind of put this in a different context. So before we fix this $182 million of stuff that's broken, what I think you're doing, and you're providing a needed structure to this, which is that before you fix anything, you need to understand what's broken, right? And you need to understand where those things live and what are they? Are they buildings? Are they roads, parking lots?
Parks.
What are they? What bucket do they fit in? And I think it's amazing you've done this, and I'm going to specifically point out parking lots. I worked really hard here to get a parking lot fixed, which was the one over by the Jack Tie baseball field. And I had worked for years to get any kind of line item allocation to reseal the parking lot. It was terrible.
Yes.
And I finally got it. So just so the team knows, I got about $200,000 put in, a line item off CDBG. But and we were going to outsource that. We outsourced this sealing as far as I understand. Well, the city went and took a look at it, and before they started or bid for, put it on the list for the contractor, they went and did an assessment, which you have done, and they found out it was beyond fail. Beyond fail. It didn't look anything like this failed picture. It was full of giant holes. We had complaints about people in wheelchairs, not being able to navigate the parking lot whatsoever, little kids, walkers, forget it. I mean, if you weren't like a mountain climber, you couldn't walk across that parking lot, just to exaggerate a bit. They had to rebuild the entire parking lot. They could not seal it. They could not cover it. And it cost, I understand, about $1 million to rebuild the parking lot. I hope I'm in the right scale, Mr. Flansburgh knows. But just one parking lot for just one park.
Yes.
$1 million.
Yes.
And so that's the kind of money we're talking about. And when we talk about you have, I calculated 44% are in failed or poor. So, that's warning lights.
Yes.
That means things are falling apart. And so my question to you, I guess, is you mentioned aggressively going after grants. I don't think there's a lot of grants out there for fixing parking lots. There might be grants out there for historic buildings. But what is really your thought on how we're going to start tackling this big unfunded basket of stuff?
So my thoughts on that are there are certain grants that are best suited to buildings, right?
Yeah.
Because there are opportunities in those grants that you wouldn't see in a parking lot. Parking lots aren't flashy. They're not super cool.
That's, I think, the point.
So you bring up a really good point is most likely general fund funding is going to need to be dedicated for
paid.
parking lots.
Yeah.
There are other sources, but I mean there may be other things out there that we will find. But right now I don't have a solution for it.
But at least we're getting our handle on the problem.
Right.
Right? By
And
getting
we'll be
everything
able
assessed.
to report back to you, through a dashboard or somehow, some way of what progress we're making with our capital improvement plan.
And the last related question to that is the parking garage considered a structure?
Yes,
A
yes.
parking lot, what is it considered?
It's considered a structure. Thank you for bringing that up. So thanks to the support of this council, the parking lot is in fairly decent condition.
The parking garage.
The parking garage, excuse me. We do need to spend some more money on the parking garage because it does sustain our parking for this facility. And if we don't take care of it now,
Right.
who knows what's going to happen.
Well, I'm so
yes.
impressed on the work that has been done.
Yes,
know,
and
in
we have
your-
made a difference.
the bunch of previous years, from the elevators to the
Yep.
lighting to the cleaning
And I
to
have
the
to
painting,
shout out to Frank. He's been doing a great job keeping
repairing the
track.
ramps.
Yes, they've
I
been
mean,
doing a
bit
great
by
job.
bit, we got that thing under control.
Yes.
And we have a safe place to park,
Yep.
right near the office. I mean, it's priceless in some ways. And then we began putting in the vehicle charging stations and
Yep.
so on. I think there's still room on the top floor.
Yep.
To look for whether it's solar or storage batteries or something, but I don't know. And I guess last word on the parking lot, which is not really its condition, but its operation. And I'm not sure who that falls under, whether that's under you or Frank Avera or who. But I do want to just remind you that, and I haven't known what forum I could say this, so I'm going to say it right now. The second floor, as I understood, of the parking lot was to be reserved for our public. And yet, when I come in at 8 o'clock, most of it's full. Okay? So something isn't quite working there. I think our staff are parking on there. I think people from other nearby buildings are maybe parking there, you know, for example, nearby residences and so on. And I just wonder, I would love you guys to take a look at it through the operational side on what we can do to reserve it for our public. Because the idea was we didn't want them to have to drive up to the 7th floor. Everyone that's parking is parked. Maybe they go out for lunch, maybe they don't. But the people that are coming here for 1 hour, it shouldn't be that they have to drive all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom. That was a previous world. And we thought by reserving the second floor for the visitors, our clients, the public, our residents, that we were giving them premium parking. That was the whole idea. So I'd love you to just look into
do.
that with
We'll
whoever
look- we will.
manages that. That'd
Yep,
be great.
we'll look into
I'll hand it over at this point. Yeah, thank you.
Stewart, any additional questions from the body at this time? Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Kosky. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon. I'm Matt Taylor. I'm the Assistant Finance Director for the City of Reno, and I'm going to be walking through the proposed fee schedule for this next year. And as a brief synopsis of what I'm going to talk about, this slide goes over the different departments that we're proposing to increase their fees by CPI, which is a majority of the departments. And then other changes are for the citywide fees, we're recommending to go with a fee study. And some changes where finance's own fees were consolidated up with the citywide fees, so you won't see a separate page for just finance this year. Municipal court didn't have any changes except for a few minor dollars here and there. And then privilege licenses are increased based off of the annual audit that we do. There's a calculation that gets done. Parks and Rec got simplified. They reduced 100 lines of their fees to make it much easier to read and combined a lot of the pool fees with the recreation fees because they're the same prices. And then any of the salary schedules were also adjusted for the current year for 2024 salary rates that we already knew from the bargaining units. So the fee schedule process starts back in December when the consumer price index for the Western region is published. And this year it was 6.2%. And the general process is we take the current year fee schedule from 23 and we'll apply the 6.2% increase to that. I've sent it out to the departments to review for any errors. And we started doing some council briefings so everyone can be apprised of the changes and we can start getting some feedback. Right now, we're looking for feedback as a consensus of what needs to be changed. And then the finalized schedule should come back to council on May 2nd for any additional changes and one more time for a review. And then it gets adopted on May 24th as part of the budget hearing. For the citywide fees, they're adjusted to go to the fee schedule or the fee study that was conducted last year. The largest change are on the appeals fees. They're currently at $55, and it's recommended that the administrative appeals go up to $112, and the land use appeals go up to $642. And one other one that's not listed on the slide are the alarm appeals, and they're actually recommended to go down $1. They're currently at 26, and they're recommended to go to 25. The building fees are restricted based off of what their ending fund balance is, and it's currently over 50%. Right now, it's at 131%. So we can increase those fees by CPI, and we can increase the valuation table, but we can't do anything outside of those two options. So the valuation table is suggested to increase to the published International Code Council valuations that came out in February of '23. Whoops. And then there was no other increase for any of the other fees. They were left flat for the continuing year. Business licenses, we do an annual calculation for flat fees and percent of gross fees, and it's based off of when the business licenses came into the general fund. And we're allowed to increase each year for both CPI and a population increase. And the chart up here shows that the percent of gross fees fluctuate from being over and under the allowed amount, but in total they net to zero. So we're good on the percent of gross fees, but the flat fees are consistently under the total allocation. So there's a little room for adjustments on there. So after department review, we're recommending to adjust the fees by CPI, with the exception of a few of the privilege licenses. For example, the alcohol fees, we're suggesting to go up by CPI and then adding another $83 on it per quarter. And we have that cushion available to us. And also there's been an issue with the technology fee and collecting that fee from business owners. It's currently billed as a separate line item on their invoice. And sometimes they'll pay the business license portion, but not the technology fee. So consolidating that technology fee into the business license fee will allow for easier collections, and staff won't have to track down $4. And there's no change to the percent of gross fees. Those are going to remain the same. Under development services, it's recommended to increase by CPI. And this is because the fee study was done last year and there was some turnover and we had a new director coming in. So it wasn't a lot of opportunity for them to review the data that went into the fee study. So it wasn't what that data we're not 100% certain on. So we'll be trued up again the next time we do a fee study, but at this time we're recommending it to just go up by CPI. And these fees include a lot of the planning applications, planning, engineering, and code enforcement fees, as well as any zone changes and even grading planning review. Fire prevention is also recommended to go up by CPI. This one we looked at what CPI was and what the fee study was. And for example, on the fire inspection fees, we're currently charging $88. With CPI, it should go up to $94, and the cost study was recommending $100. So there's not a big difference between the cost study and CPI, so we chose to go with CPI to remain at the lower rate. IT is charged out if an outside entity wants to use our IT department for any assistance and programs that they have coming on. So these fees were adjusted to current salary rates and not by CPI, because we're allowed to charge up to what it costs to provide a service. And this one was not included in the fee study when it was reviewed. Municipal court, most of their fees are set by NRS, so it's very difficult to change it because it's dictated what we have to charge. And then the fines are determined by judges, and NRS says what the minimum and maximum fines are. Under enforcement, we're recommending the fees to increase by CPI. And I called out parking permits because this one hasn't changed in a few years. And we're recommending the 6-month permit to go from $11 to $12 and the 12-month permit to go from $22 to $24. And some of the fees under enforcement are this nuisance inspection fee going from $120 to $128. And the fee study had recommended $202. So there's a large discrepancy, and we did not feel comfortable going up to the full fee study. And it was the same for the dumpster fee that they're recommending $202, and the certification of abandoned property went up to $404. On the fee study, we're recommending $367 for the abandoned property. Parks and Rec developed a plan when the minimum wage increase went into effect, and it was a 5-year step-up plan, and we're currently in year 3. And council has adopted the full increase to the minimum wage in the current year. So we're recommending to skip year 4 and go to year 5 for the fee schedule. Like I said it before, they consolidated many fees and reduced the number of pages significantly. And we also reviewed some of the facility rentals to make sure that we're covering more of the costs than what we currently are. In total, there were, I think, 87 or 113 fees that were increased altogether, but 62% of those are under $5, and the ones that are over $10 relate to the facility rentals mostly for a whole day of renting the facility. Some of the new fees that were added on the Parks and Rec fees are the adaptive cycling center fees, and then a variety of water polo rentals at the different pools. And then also the youth development late pickup and cancellation fees, and that's mainly so we can recoup some of the costs of staff having to stay late. Police fees are recommended to increase by CPI. A lot of these fees are also dictated by the FBI and NRS, and they include the fees like the criminal history checks, work cards, and in any fingerprinting that needs to be done. We tried to do a cleanup of the special event fees so they could all live in one place, because before they were partially under special events, partly under Parks and Rec, and partly under business licenses. So we've tried to consolidate them all together, and we adjusted the largest fees for police time to what their actual rates are, because we end up charging the promoters what's actually used to provide the service. So hopefully this should mean that there's fewer bills being sent out after the fact, because we're collecting the money up front instead of a lower difference. And any of the other special event fees were adjusted by CPI, and these are for any planning fees, inspections, and like sound permits that have to be acquired. Public Works is recommended to increase by CPI, and the main one I wanted to call out here were for parking meters to increase from $1.70 to $2 per hour, which would also feed into the other related fees for parking hoods, city garage, or City Hall garage, and any lost ticket fees. And I looked back, and in 2017, the fee was $1, and we increased it to $1.50 in 2018, and it's remained consistent until 2023, when it went up to $1.75, and now we're asking to go up to $2. Utility services are set to increase by CPI, and that's in ordinance that we have to go up by that or by that percentage, and it's the same that we carry through all of the other fee schedules. And they include any stormwater discharge permits and environmental permits that have to be applied for. So at this time, to recap, these are the changes, the biggest changes that we've made to the fee schedule at this time. What we're looking for now is for council to give some direction and feedback on any fees or areas that they feel need to be adjusted or that they are content with. And then we will be bringing it back on May 2nd with changes for you to review.
Sorry, Mr. Taylor, technology, not my friend always. Great work. I mean, I know that this is an iterative process, so we've been working on this, certainly at least the last 6 or 7 weeks. But in the review that was done, the 3/10/23 review, what do you mean by errors and changes? You're just saying in your review process, you caught things
Yes.
that were errors? Okay.
They were sent to the departments to review, and if there were any errors in calculations or any noticeable changes that, like the additions of new fees or any cancellations of fees, or to remove them, that's when they came back to
That
us.
makes sense. Okay, I'm going to start with Ms. Dewar, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I have to compliment you because I think it's incredibly important to continue looking at our fees. This is, these are our publics paying directly to us for service. And it's very important to keep those, in balance, in tune, and relevant. And I particularly want to commend the work that was done in parks. I think by now they've cut out 140 lines. I mean, these are dozens of pages of fees with like slight changes. This is 25 cents different. This one's still different. By consolidating this, it makes it both a lot easier for the public to understand and also us to even begin to grasp it. I asked you for some examples of some fees, like to rent a pavilion. and I got some good answers about the size of pavilions. To rent McKinley Center, I think it went from $100 maybe to $140 this time. We got all that. Those things make sense. The one area, and I did talk to you about this already, that I was really struggling with was the increase in the appeals fees. And the reason I'm struggling with it is a couple fold. One is that it's 1,000%, over 1,000% increase. I can't imagine us doing that in any other realm. But at the end of the day, that 1,000% increase, I also asked how many appeals do we get? I thought it might have been 12 a year. Staff said about 10. So that, if we went to what you recommended here, it'd be about $6,500 a year. So we're talking about a very small amount of money, but a very large increase, but a very small amount of money. It's my opinion that we should not, when I asked why most of the fees, 95% of them are being adjusted by CPI, not by some other number, like the fee study or whatever. People felt that those increases, to quote you just a minute ago, you said there was a large discrepancy between what the fee study might have said and what seemed reasonable. I agree that the fee for appeals should go up. $55 is a low number. We increased it by 10% just a year ago. I think it was 50 and it went to 55, and that might have been 2 years ago or 1 year ago. But anyway, I heard when I asked why we were doing this and I tried to dig deeper, I heard that we're trying to basically dissuade frivolous appeals. That the dollar amount is so low. We're not trying to recoup costs, because it costs, to manage appeal, file everything, post everything, put in the paper, and all is pretty high. So it's essentially to get rid of frivolous appeals. So it's really easy to pay $55. It might be a little harder to pay $650. But here's my concern. So in my opinion, often you can't tell the merits of a case till you hear it. And to prejudge it, like that this one's frivolous, but this one makes sense, I think is antithetical to the system of justice that we have. And I looked at other city fees, like the municipal court fees. They have appeals too. They're only $25. Certainly they're not in any kind of cost recovery. And some could say the fee is so low that it encourages frivolous appeals of administrative issues in municipal court as well. So what I would recommend, I think first it's important to say one thing. I think about a quarter to a third of the appeals, we at council actually agree with the appellant and we sustain. And unless we get to hear the appeal, we don't know, what we think about it. So I do think that they need to go up. I would recommend even doubling them to $100 or having them go up by CPI, which is what you've done to virtually every fee. But I don't think going up 1,000% sends the right message to our publics. Think about this way. This is about developments, not other administrative things. If a development is proposed near you or in your region and you appeal it, you're sitting there living your life when suddenly something comes to your world, and then you have to react. And I think that the cost to react, to respond, to protect your own property rights or something else should not be this level of high. And I understand, talking to staff, that it is relatively reasonable given Washoe County's fee and other communities' fees. I'm not sure I agree with their fees, frankly. I think the cost to appeal something or get an opinion or be part of the justice system, because after us, it goes into court. We're sitting in our quasi-judicial capacity at that moment. I think that should be a low entry fee, not $55 maybe, but something relatively low. And so that you have the opportunity to defend yourself. And finally, I used some examples to you about democracy. Things that cost a lot of money, like voting, costs a lot of money to put that on and fund it, but we don't pay to vote. Even something like get a record, a public record, the legislature set a fee that says we can't recover time, only materials. And I really think this process falls within being able to do your, be able to be part of city actions and to be able to engage with the city on something you don't think is just. So I understand we're also looking at appeals, and maybe we'll refine and be able to, quote, screen out frivolous appeals with other processes, but I don't think we should do it on the amount that we charge. So thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Dewar, I'll sort of just piggyback on what you've said there and say, generally speaking, I agree with you in principle. I don't know that anyone is deterred from filing an appeal based on the amount that it costs. So I don't know that you'll avoid the problem you're trying to solve.
Right.
If ever then there was a problem, I'm not sure it is a problem to allow people to appeal. We have some issues that we haven't resolved internally about standing, for example, which impacts more greatly the willingness or ability of a person to appeal than does the fee. So I think probably there's some room for a middle ground here to be approached. If what it is we started on a path where they double what they are now, and then you put it on a CPI glide path, I can see that as being correct. But no, we're not trying to discourage anyone from engaging in the public process or in their ability to redress their government. I don't think that that's true. I will say that I have been troubled by historically council members who file their own appeals and then they use their discretionary funds to pay for the costs. That seems to be ethically questionable and something that could be potentially addressed either in this or in another way in our ordinance structure or something like that, because I think that that is sort of a conflict for sure. And those, ethical gray areas are often troubling to me about when that happens and then the member steps off the dais and is appearing on that side as an appellant. That's a very curious thing to me. But ultimately, Ms. Dewar is right. And maybe I'll confirm that I heard correctly. It's 10 of these roughly a year that are being filed in this vein.
Correct.
Yeah, we're spending more than $6,500 having you chase it around and us talk about it than we will to just make sure that the fee is upsized a bit or right-sized. I'm not sure what other communities are charging. Obviously, we tasked you, Mr. Taylor, with telling us are we breaking even on the things that we're doing, like a cost recovery basis. I think Ms. Dewar is right. We're not trying to make money in the deal. I also don't want us to lose money in the deal, but perhaps it's okay given the low dollar amount. So just those are, again, feedback from us as you move forward in this process. But Ms. Dewar is right in her thinking. And so
Mr. Vice Mayor, just
Mr. Thornley.
if for no reason other than posterity, I do have a list of the appeal fees for surrounding jurisdictions.
Yeah, I'd like to know it.
A little
if
bit
it
of
can be
context, I think.
added to the record.
So of course, we're not close to recovering our costs as it
Yeah.
relates to the administration of these appeals. But for context, the city of Sparks charges their actual expenses by the hour. Carson City charges $250 an hour. The city of Fernley and Lyon County each charge $750 as a flat rate. Douglas County is $956 and Washoe County is $1,200.
Yeah, so that's surprising, meaning we're incredibly below all of that. But again, I'm not sure anyone is choosing to appeal or not appeal based on that number. So for my part, I would just make it certain that people know we want them to exercise whatever privileges and rights they think are attendant to their entree into government in a way that is meaningful to them. I mean, I think those are important numbers, and perhaps, again, there's some way to go from where we are today to somewhere closer to some of those numbers. I don't know if I like the idea of charging people by the hour for the time.
don't.
That seems odd to me at first blush, but it's not what's before us. So for my part, I would just say let's get moving in the direction of increasing these fees. What it is, again, we're spending more time talking about it than the costs that we're trying to recover. So be realistic about it. And again, for 10 of them a year, I think we're doing okay, right? I don't think there's like a pool of vexatious applicants. I may at times disagree with them. I don't know.
Right.
Ms. Dewar said many times we have reversed appeals, which is an interesting thing. It'd be interesting from a legal perspective to see if that's true. It would be interesting over time to follow that, but that's not really the purpose of your budgetary inquiry. So we'll leave it, I think, for that time there, and then we'll go to Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And I guess I'll just come out with, I respectfully disagree with my colleagues, and I think the appeal fees should be higher based on our conversations leading up to this and what I understand to be the costs in other jurisdictions, and wanting to run our government more like a business. When I look at the enterprise fund, that's very successful. We're charging for a service. I would like to see us at least recoup some of the costs of doing business. And when I did an overall look at what was happening, it's somewhere in the number, I'm just gonna say, I can't remember if it was 40 or 60, so I'll say 50% we're still subsidizing what the services we do. So we're not even recouping the cost of what it is to do business. Is that accurate for most of our services?
For Parks and Rec services, yes, but for the appeals fee, the 642 was the full cost recovery.
Okay. And I was looking at stuff overall, the whole fee study when I looked
Yes.
at it, where we subsidize a lot of stuff. And then on the Parks and Rec, one of the questions that I had asked when we met was, nobody necessarily wants to raise Park and Rec fees, but we do have opportunities for people to apply for scholarships if that's something that they can't. Is that still going to be part of
Correct.
this?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So if you can't use a park because you're financially unable or for whatever reason, we will help you get there, for sure.
Yes, there's a mechanism to help people.
Okay. One other thing on business license I had brought up in my discussions is I would love to just see one number for the fee, not a multiplier. I don't know why we do that, and I can't remember if you said why there was a multiplier, but when you had the $4 fee and then you have a multiplier and then you have the fee on top of that, the base fee, I'm just wondering if we could get to a place where it's one fee.
So like more of a chart instead of a schedule?
Yeah, so if you, at Washoe County business, if you make between, $1 and $10, this is what you pay. If you're between $10 and $20, this is what you pay. I think that would make it easier as a business owner. The other thing is, I think we will hear from more specific business licensing departments, but I love our team. We've got to do a better job of making it easier to use the Excella front facing. It is, if we're gonna have these fees, there's no service being provided there, in my opinion. So I look forward to those discussions, but thank you for all of the time you put into this and explaining the details to me. Thank you.
Ms. Taylor, with Acela, you have a business that you license, and you're saying when you as a business owner go to Acela to do a thing,
I want
it's
to
not
throw my
friendly.
computer out the window.
Well, I've heard that from a number of people, oddly enough, and I know that Ms. Turney and the businessing license people are open to hearing about that, because I have gotten that routinely as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Breckus, you're up, I think.
Yeah, and I might have a lot of questions. You have up there council feedback done in February, and I'm getting an unequal level of service from my colleagues because I am not getting those briefings. The managers made staff unavailable to me for these sort of items. But one question I had was, I did get a study that y'all did this year, and then I also have the one from last year. They seem to be very different in terms of scope and depth. The one this year I read, I was like, it's just not really going there. The one from the previous year seemed in depth. What was the, did you have the two, and it was two different.
It was the same study between the 2 years, and you received it last year, so this year was more of a summary.
Oh, was it? Okay,
Yes.
so you were just going over the previous years. But I thought that one was a company, the MGT Consulting. I thought
Yes.
you used a Reno-based company for this year. Or am I-
No, we didn't have one done this year.
Okay, so you are relying upon the other one. Okay, well, those are the sort of things. I mean, in my view, moving a lot of these things onto CPIs, when I was the liaison to the FAB spent a lot of time on the CPIs, and a lot of CPI moves by hard goods, and these are usually moved by service levels of, although you could argue that a lot of our service levels, which are salaries, then back up to the CPI. Does that seem like a good thread to look at it, you think?
Yes, they typically use the same CPI for both.
Yeah. And at one
negotiations
point, the
and
FAB had a lot of problems with that. They're like, why does, a management assistant get paid this much more because lumber is, higher? I mean, so I do see and appreciate, and that was a big issue for the FAB at that time. Appeals, what are appeals? Appeals are access to me. Okay, and I'm up here listening to a lot. I heard Mike Kazmierski the other day. The mayor has, very distinguished roles. Sometimes we have dogs, sometimes we have kids. That's access to me too. But the people out there who get, the law requires them to get a notice or see a sign in their neighborhood, they get access to me for a reasonable cost. And that cost is, not $642. I'm okay with $50, maybe $100. And then to those who I've delegated authority to, which is the hearing officer. because then sometimes some of those jump then to court. But access to me is not costing $642 for an hour of my time. That's how I view that one. Now, the user groups, I didn't understand what you meant by the changes you're proposing between the user groups and the flat fee people. And could you go to that slide again? And maybe I missed this in the briefings, because I've had handles on this over the years and then I skip it. You're wanting to move the flat fee people a bit more?
Correct.
And do you have a list of the flat fee people? One's a cab company and how many cabs that owner has, right? Is that an example of one?
It would be, I did an example, let me find it. It was for an alcohol license.
Well, I want to talk about alcohol differently. So what other than alcohol is flat fee? I think it was the taxi cab driver and how many taxi cabs.
I think you're correct.
Do you have a list somewhere you can point and flag for us so I can review it in between the next month?
Yes.
Okay, and we'll just leave it at that because I got 1 second left. And then I'll talk about alcohol and the others.
Ms. Breckus, go ahead.
Okay, alcohol. You did show quite a bit of jump on the alcohol, I think. I'm going to have push back a little bit to that because right before I came on council in 2012, there was a grand bargain on alcohol. And then we've done some COVID-y things with alcohol. And I need to understand a little bit more. How did you want to accelerate alcohol? I know I'm shooting you a lot of stuff. I'm okay on the flat fees, being.
For the alcohol fees,
yeah.
Most of them went up between $50 and $125, which is a combination of both the CPI and the additional increase. So for the alcohol premise per quarter, it currently is at $620, and we're suggesting it to go up to $744. And that's a combination of the $37 related to CPI, an additional $83 for adding on to the fee, and then the $4 technology fee to get up to the difference.
I can be okay with the $4 going in across the board because it's there. Messing with the alcohol, because, obviously that industry had a lot of change, but there was a grand bargain. It's going to be too many people in my ear come July about the alcohol rates. It really is. So I'm not comfortable with you doing that unless you go out and do it another public participation sort of thing. That's just where I'm at, and I'm advising the others who haven't had a lot of alcohol license holders come and get in their ears. That's the way we should do it. Who uses our IT services? I mean,
It's very few. It's a few. I think they said there was a nonprofit currently asking for help on setting up servers or something like that.
Yeah, I just don't see that anywhere. The park jump. Why do you want? I don't know about skipping the 5th year and the 4th year. Park is the most equitable to me, and I want to stay the course. What is your argument again for jumping over to the 5th year?
The plan was based around going up on our minimum wage increases, and we jumped to the highest minimum wage this year to the top. So that's why we're suggesting going to the top of the fee schedule.
Yeah, look. We just gave on the last agreement, the police got a match what they never had before, right? And then, we're nickel and diming, poor family, families where it's a scratch for spring break to take the kids to the pool and our lifeguards or, people to clean the bathroom. It's like, are we hitting low wage workers or not? And we are. And I've stood with that very strongly for a lot of years. So no, for me. And then parking fees. I see where you want to go. It's an unpopular thought, but if we're going to do parking fees, we should do parking fees in this garage for employees. And that's how you pay for the garage. And I was making $25,000 at the city of Albuquerque in 1994, and I paid for my parking, or I took the bus, or I paid for a surface lot and walked in. I just think that there's other values too in making parking pay for itself, and employees and all across the board, everyone, permit, 30-month permit or something, should be the way parking needs to be priced. And if anyone wants to see books or literature on that, I can send it to them. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Dewar.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to follow up. I think I agree with my colleague, Ms. Taylor, about the confusion. I've been getting a business license here for many years, several of them. And this flat and the gross, it's very confusing. It's hard to calculate. I just wanted to make sure I understood. So are you saying leave the flat the same or increase it by CPI?
The flats were increasing by CPI,
And
and the
the other
percent
you're
of
leaving
gross
alone.
is staying the same.
Staying the same. And then I wasn't really clear on what Ms. Breckus said about alcohol. You said this is the way we should do it, but I didn't grasp it. It was too fast. So did you, and can you repeat, or do you know?
I think she wanted more community outreach for the alcohol. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to add in?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Council. Ashley Turney, Chief Innovation and Experience Officer. A couple of notes on the increased privileged license fees.
Okay.
That comes from a few components, partially being this council has given some direction in previous meetings about the need to reevaluate privileged licenses. Additionally, based off the need, they are a privilege. They require an incredibly higher amount of staff time associated with the evaluation and renewals. Quarterly fees come in, and it means just that. Staff has to actually renew these licenses on a quarterly basis. So there is more staff time going into these. We've also recently changed our practice to where any privileged license coming in with a CUP or an SUP will have a code enforcement agent going out to do a pre-inspection before that comes before this body. There is no fee associated with that right now in which we can recover. So this is an attempt at cost recovery as well as identifying direction from this body that you'd like us to be looking at that.
So could you summarize the change again for us?
Less than $300 a year would be an increase to quarterly license holders at this time.
Per quarter?
No, annual.
Oh, annual, so $75 or something.
83, I think is what it is per
Okay,
quarter.
Per quarter. And you think it's a closer to cost recovery?
It's not cost recovery, but it gets us one step
Okay.
closer. We thought this would be something again, so we're not making large corrections later.
Okay.
This is something we've not had that big increase in the past, and based off of staff time associated with this, we felt this was the best attempt.
So we'll have to look at that percent too. I don't have a good feel for it, without diving into it a little bit. Finally, back on these, I think we kind of put it to bed about the appeals, but I just wanted to assure staff that I didn't realize that the 642 was full cost recovery, and I think that kind of also is another mark that we generally, to Ms. Taylor's point, don't generally get full cost recovery. But if in this one case, or even any case that we want to, including development permits, maybe we should be looking into the enterprise fee fund, which has, after you pay for the second floor, $12 million in it. Take the missing $5,000 or $5,500 out of there and put it over to development services. I mean, and there's other ways to get full cost recovery if that's our goal, besides maybe putting a crimp on seeking justice. And so I just wanted to say that we just shouldn't use a financial test, I don't think, for if you're a little bit wealthier and it will hurt a little bit less, that you go forward. But if you're just maybe a person in a mobile home park, doesn't have a lot of money, but worried about what's going on next door, we want to provide that equal access to redress, justice, our ear, whatever. So those are just some final thoughts.
Mr. Taylor, I think, there's been good and robust discussion today. By and large, I think everything in the materials is something I am supportive of. I like Ms. Dewar. I would like to see us not make the jump on the appeal fees in that way. I think they could go up to, again, it could be a doubling of it if that's what it is, from $55 to $110. That seems fine to me. For my part, we are living in a world where, a head of cauliflower is $10. I mean, everything is going up. And so I don't think it would come to shock or surprise anybody that, the alcohol licensing fees would be increasing, kind of commensurate with what we're experiencing in, general rising costs. So I don't think there's anything there. Again, everything I think that you presented, with the sort of the exception of this question that Ms. Dewar has raised, I think is the right track, in the right direction. Are there any other comments? Oh, Ms. Breckus, I'm sorry. Oh, I see your hand is raised. Go ahead, Ms. Breckus.
Yeah, so, we have this discussion about the fees, the business license fees all the time, and I get it, they go with the general fund, so we want to get there. But it's just a deeper issue that we're not probing outside of budget where the values need to be addressed. And, you know, we've got our overreaching council priorities and we're always told what those are, but, you know, this body needs to get a handle really on what they want work items to be on an annual basis. And this is, you know, the umpteenth time I've seen these things come out and they're not coming out well. So the flat fees and the percentage of gross fees together, when they combine, state law only lets them all together jump up so much each year, correct?
We're limited to the cap of what's calculated. So we've been under that cap significantly for the past few years. So that's why we're suggesting a larger increase this year.
Where do we
But
have more room in the cap? Under the gross fees or the flat fees?
the flat fees.
But it's up to us to decide what we want to be flat fee and what we want to be gross free. Gross, who pays gross, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's kind of the missing piece there is, you know, where do we want to game it, advantage it our best? And does it follow a logical policy basis? The taxi guy with 20 taxis, and who's another one that's flat fee? Is it square foot of warehouse distribution? You know,
Those ones look like they're a percentage or a rate based off of the square footage of the facility.
okay, yeah, so taxi cab drivers and per taxi cab and, you know, square foot of those. You know, why don't we do doctors on MRIs he runs or something like that? I mean, it's all over the place. I think the council needs to go deep onto that and understand, you know, what is ease of policy and administration to our different, you know, industry sectors and what meets our goals for revenue. And then, you know, Ms. Turney came up and talked about the time involved in some of these other ones. Well, I want to know what privilege is required to be issued by this body and what privilege isn't. You know, do we have jurisdiction to say, no, the secondhand dealers, they're not going to be privileged?
Actually, Attorney Chief Innovation Experience Officer, secondhand dealers privileged license pursuant to Chapter 5 of your code.
Okay.
So one of the recommendations we would be looking for from this body, and we'll talk about that in tomorrow's hearing, would be the antiquated code in which we are currently enforcing. So we would be looking for some direction tomorrow from that. But to answer your question, yes, they're in code that way.
Yeah, that's not a budget issue. That's a policy discussion that should be baked separate and apart from itself, in my view. You know, my head is really on balancing and FTEs and everything. That's policy. So I've been asking for this over the years. You know, let's get a handle on the business license. Let's not plug it in operational to balance. Let's get the discussion of what does what and where we want to go with those sort of things. So those are my comments on
Okay,
on
Mr.
that.
Taylor, I think your time with us is done. Outstanding job and presentation. I don't know that I've seen you at the dais before, but it was an absolute joy to work with you through this process. Your
Thank you.
knowledge is it's crazy. I mean, it's just the depth of it and the way in which you're able to rattle off the things. I envy you because I have none of those skills. So congratulations on the presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Oh, wait, Miss Ebert is in the queue too. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I also just wanted to agree with Naomi on the fees for the appeals. I think that even the $600 is just too high. We need to keep it affordable for residents. So I just wanted to chime in on that.
Okay, Mr. Taylor, thank you so much. Mr. Manager, where are we? What have we got left in the time we have left?
That brings us to the end of the day's scheduled events.
Oh,
Oh, there's not one more thing today?
Not today,
Oh, okay.
that's tomorrow.
okay.
So can I go to the clerk then and ask, are we doing departmental items E4 or that's tomorrow?
That would be a question for Mr. Manager because it's on our agenda, so we would either need to.
Okay, so Mr. Manager, can we figure something out here? I have an agenda that was posted, of course, for the public that includes redevelopment agency board
Right.
discussion. And so I need to know if that's being trailed to another day or,
My understanding was that we were prepared to discuss the redevelopment budget and open the redevelopment agency hearing tomorrow.
okay. How are we noticed, Mr. Hall or Mr. Shipman? I just want to make sure that we keep on track with what our agenda requires us to be on track for. I appreciate that we are taking pieces of this over time. It's appreciated, certainly for our brains to engage, but
Vice Mayor Reese, if you would like, I think we can just open it and continue it till tomorrow. So then
Okay.
that way it's just in the record clearly, and then we can open and close both ends of this meeting.
Okay, well, let's get back to our agenda. I'll assume that we're going to start first with the C item.
We will take that last, actually, so I'm going to go ahead and open redevelopment
Okay,
and
thank you
call.
so much for keeping us on track.
Thank you. So we will call roll for the redevelopment agency. Councilmember Breckus? Dewar?
Here.
Martinez?
Here.
Ebert?
Here.
Taylor? Reese?
Here.
Shivi absent at this time. We do have a quorum of the redevelopment agency board. Item E2 is general public comment, to which we have none at this time. Item E3 is approval of the redevelopment agency
Can I get a
agenda.
motion for the agenda approval, please?
Motion to approve the agenda.
I have a motion by Councilmember Dewar, second by Mr. Martinez. Any additional discussion at this time? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item E4, can I get a motion to continue?
And that's what you want, Mr. Manager, to,
That is the way tomorrow's agenda is designed.
okay, and when we get tomorrow's agenda, which I don't happen to have in my hands, is it pretty much identical to this, but we just start with E4?
So tomorrow's agenda includes a presentation from President Sandoval to kick the day off. ACM Edelstein will be up to talk about downtown.
Wait, what did
I
you
did
say?
that in reverse order. Ms. Turney will be up, Director Turney will be up. ACM Edelstein will be up to talk about downtown and economic development, and we'll do the redevelopment budget tomorrow with Ms. Van
Okay,
Buren.
gotcha. Okay, so yeah, motion to continue item E4-1 to tomorrow.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Dewar, a second by Councilmember Taylor. Any additional discussion at this time?
Wait, did you say a presentation by,
Hold on, Mr. Breckus, we've got a motion on the floor. Any discussion at this time? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, so we're on item E5, which is closing public comment for the redevelopment agency board. I'm going to go ahead and close that out. We do have a public commenter, but I'm going to let them go back into into our standard meeting. So we're going to close out item E5. So I'm looking for a motion to adjourn redevelopment agency board.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion by Councilmember Dewar, a second by Councilmember Martinez. Any additional questions? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. Motion carries unanimously. Let's go back now into the main meeting. I think we're at C, but before we do C, can we come back? Mr. Manager, did you want to explain what our day will be like tomorrow for the body?
Absolutely. So we have a presentation from President Sandoval to discuss the partnership with the university, where the university is looking to head in the future. That, of course, ties into our business licensing practices, our special event practices, and the things that we have going on in downtown in particular. It also informs our economic development strategy. So you'll be hearing from Ms. Turney and Mr. Edelstein tomorrow. And we will wrap up the day tomorrow with the RDA budgets, and that presentation, of course, will be Director Van Buren.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Now we'll go back to you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. We do have one public commenter via Zoom that we will go ahead and move over now. This is Tamika Shanti.
Good afternoon. Tamika Shanti from the ACLU of Nevada for the record. Thank you, council members, for this amazing meeting and your attention to detail on this budget. It's always very important for our municipalities to be very critical of their budgets. I just wanted to comment back to section B1 regarding the appeals and business licenses. I believe 4 of the members on this board stated that they also felt that that 1,000%, I believe it was, increase is slightly egregious. Well, I want to say it's very egregious, and it could be a prohibitor to access of justice in the government. Just for the record, there needs to be some reconsideration in that cost and fee. It is not based off of anything other than, I believe the rumor was frivolous appeals. I don't know that 10 to 12 appeals can be considered frivolous. Just for the record, I just want that noted. And thanks again for your time. Oh, excuse me. Thanks again for your time for this meeting.
Okay, Madam Clerk, I think we're at the moment for a final adjournment motion.
Just for the record, I would like to state that we did receive 3 letters of correspondence after 4 p.m. yesterday. So those are logged as closing public comment for today's meeting. There were one letter of support, 1 letter of opposition, and 1 letter of concern. Those have been distributed to the Reno City Council and are part of the record. And yes, at this time, I am looking for a motion to adjourn.
I have a motion by Councilmember Taylor, a second by Ms. Ebert. Any additional questions? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously.